man speaking in the city square, trying to tell somebody that he cares. Can you blame the voice of youth for asking what is true? Yeah, the ones that you're calling wild are gonna be the leaders in a little while, when will the lonely voice of youth cry what is true? This our world's waking to a newborn babe, and I solemnly swear it'll be their way. You better help that voice of youth find what is true. And the lonely voice of youth cries, what is true?
All right. Just responding to more unhinged, stupid people on the internet, because I'm on the internet. Ugh, that's the problem. We'll get into that though. um, we'll definitely get into that. Don, where did the song come from? Okay, so the story of the song is interesting. Here's where the song came from. Um, one of our friends, Boom Shroom, who has his own YouTube channel, Boom Shroom, which he's been posting to recently. If you want to see um, a young male struggling with the meaning crisis, go to his channel. He's been doing it quite nicely publicly. Um, he made a suggestion that the Johnny Cash song "What Is Truth" would be good, a good song for like an intro song for the channel. And a while back, we had somebody on the Discord server who was a rather talented artist and knew quite a bit of music and had some very interesting instruments. And she agreed to make a sea shanty out of What Is Truth by Johnny Cash. And she and her son sang the song and did the music for it. So, in short, it comes from the cooperation of people on my Discord server and in our community, because that's how all this is possible, right? Like, this is all cooperation, right? In some ways, it's so funny. I was thinking about this earlier today. This is the house that John Vervaeke built in many ways, right? Because this kind of all started from his not awakening from meaning crisis per se, but from the meditation series. That's where the initial Discord stuff happened on the, you know, I moved the community that I built on his YouTube channel on those live streams over to the Discord server that was pre-existing. That was a mistake. Uh, onto the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis Discord server, and then that's where we all kind of got together. So that's and the reason why we got together was the commitment to shared participation. Roughly speaking, we wouldn't have phrased it that way back then, but that's okay. These things happen. Good story. Thanks. Yeah, I like that story. Yeah, it is a good story, right? Because it just talks about, like, sure, it's my channel, but actually, it's like a lot of goes into this channel, and most of it's not me. So as with most things, right? Like, yeah, Elon Musk, but like, he's not designing the rockets. He didn't start the Tesla company, right? But also the Tesla company wouldn't exist without him, right? And it's that level of cooperation, not opposition. There's no opponent processing, because that destroys the world and causes war. So don't do that. But it's that level of cooperation that we exemplify, right? I mean, that's how this channel happened. It's explicitly how this channel happened. All right, unlike my other channel, which I am going to talk about. But that's our story. I've got my Sam Pal. Hopefully you do too. I've got some tea. I didn't do table rock tea today because I think I'm out. And I forgot to do my puka tea, my 3 ginger puka tea. So yeah, I get the 3 ginger puka tea here, and we'll let that steep uh, as long as we want because we can. And then, of course, I've got some more Sam Powell. Have you considered? Have you considered? Because it's important. It's okay to be a Muppet, just don't be stupid and a Muppet. I think that might be our theme. Yeah. So sort of interesting. Uh, I did another video on my other channel, which is just my name. Um, Complete unhinged rant because I was flaming angry, flaming mad. Uh, there's a dust up in the software world with the Linux kernel, and I watched a video on it. I don't track any of that stuff anymore. However many decades ago, I did Linux kernel work myself, but I haven't. It was minor. It was bug fixing. That's what I'm best at, actually. That's what I can do with the least amount of effort and better than everybody else at the same time, is bug fixing. Um, but every once in a while, I check in on how's the Linux kernel team doing, like what's going on, and that it's interesting to watch the way things changed and we got Git, the Git tool out of it. And Git is not a version control system. It can do version control, but that's actually not what it is. Anyway, alas, I digress. Oh well, see, there we go. It's not like the rant. Okay, good. It's again right now. It's approaching. You know, it's got more than 644 views. Right? I'm like, why? Why is that channel doing so well? But on random, I don't do any SEO work. I don't do any editing. I turn on the camera. It's got bad lighting, bad sound. I use it to adjust the camera for this sometimes. Sometimes I'm like, I need to do video on my other channel so that I can do calibration on all the equipment. And then I don't do the lighting. I don't it's horrible. Um but I got that H1B visa thing. I think that's approaching 2K views. And of course I've gotten like, I don't know, 50 subs in the past month. But anyway, so I was pointing out in that in my rant, like, this guy did this video, and like he just wouldn't say these guys are lying because they're lying. Like a lie's a lie. I don't care how it happens because I'm a pragmatist. And if you say something's untrue, it's still untrue. Like this isn't that hard. Just say it's a lie and move on. You don't have to condemn the person unless, as with this case, you have a lot of evidence to show that they're a bad actor, which they're a bad actor. And I had a few bad commenters too. Like one of my, like I said, just dealing with right before the camera came on. I'm like, why are you doing this to yourself? You don't need to do this. You can leave that for 4 or 5 hours. It'll be fine. No, I couldn't. I definitely couldn't. It's like, no, I'm gonna deal with this guy right now. It's like, screw this guy. Yeah, I mean, it's just bad programmers. I can't handle it. I'm having a breakdown over the destruction of the software industry due to the meaning crisis, no less. So ironic. But look, I mean, we're going to talk about stupidity and the ways to sort of recognize it and what it means and why it's important. And you kind of see this everywhere, right? Like you see people sort of stuck in patterns, like Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, Dust Up. That I've been tracking Brett Cooper's take on that, and some of Candace's Owens' work on that, just because I don't know. I was bored. I figured I'd dive into some pop culture stuff just to poke around, see what's going on, right? It's a good way to get a feel for meaning crisis stuff is to, do your research, right? And that's part of the research. So yeah, it just turns out Blake Lively's following what she thinks is the pattern that Ryan Reynolds followed. And there's several good videos out there showing, no, 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 this is why it worked for Ryan Reynolds, and this is why it couldn't work for Blake Lively, right? And then of course they're married, but yeah, you see it. It's like, well, that's stupid. Right. Right. And you're seeing a lot of stupidity lately, like a real lot. It's sort of surprising how many stupid people are kind of coming out of the woodwork and showing that they were never sort of smart. Not even, look, they're in the lower half of the bell curve and they're probably way further down than you expect, right? And so we're just seeing that, like, just sort of came up this week right after I picked my topic, of course. Uh, Strange. Happens pretty reliably though, like right up until today, right? I'm just being hit with more examples of stupidity, and I'm like, well, there's too many of them. I can't. I can't fit them all in. Like I don't have time to prepare, and I've got the the slides are coming. Well, not slides, but yeah. Um, Dawn, yes, I can I can give you that to some extent. So Ryan Reynolds took over the Deadpool movies, right? But he did it in a very specific way by cooperating with people and offering real value and uh, being smart about it and not being overbearing and out of a genuine desire to help, right? And Blake Lively's just a spoiled rich girl who wants her way and decided that she wanted this thing that wasn't hers that she put no work into and then she thought that she could get away with appearing to do what her husband had done for Deadpool, at least from her perspective, but not actually doing any of the work. And of course, you can't because you get caught. And now she's been caught. There's there's some really good videos on this. I don't remember the channels off the top of my head. They'll pop up on my feed again if you're super interested. I can. This one guy went over the whole thing. He said, here's what Ryan Reynolds did with Deadpool, and Blake didn't do any of that, and that's why she's gonna lose. And of course, she had to lie. She's been caught by the judge. It's a whole thing. Like she's not getting out of this without paying a few $100 million, I think. And she should because she's a horrible person. So there's always that. Yeah, throwing Taylor Swift under the bus probably wasn't a good idea either, right? Sally Joe, the stupid people run around more when things shake. It's science. Yes. Ironically, true. When things are shaking, people run around more. That that is true. Ixnay Veruca Salt. I want it now. Veruca Salt, good reference. I haven't heard Veruca Salt in a while. Yeah, and Sally, that actually that kind of reminds me uh, of something in particular. Let me see if I can call it up because it's rather interesting. Yeah, I saw this today on on Facebook, and of course, this is stupid, right? Like you should never trust anybody who's visibly stressed out. Stressed people do not make good decisions. um, they are more likely to act emotionally and act out emotionally. Don't trust people who are stressed out. This is bad advice no matter what's going on, right? And so what's happening here is that when you have a situation where uh, people feel like their tribe is too small and they're stupid, so they're tribalists. Like I'm never worried about my tribe size, probably because I've been homeless, so I had a tribe of one. Um, they want more people in their tribe, and so if they're stressed out, they want more people like them, and that's as far as their thinking goes, and that's how you get stuff like this. It's really that simple. A lot of people object. They're like, "No, it can't be that simple." It's like, no, it is that simple. I'm sorry, but it is. Like, the whole believe people when they tell you who they are. Yes, it's often that simple. It's sad, right? It's sad, but it's that simple. Hold on a sec. I gotta Oh, yeah, okay. Sorry, it just something new popped up and I can't read real well with a blue eye. Um, not that I can read real well without the blue eye, but it helps to pretend it's just that. Uh, Sally Joe reminds me of the 200,000 box elder bugs to run around since I've been redoing my floor. Yeah, Sally Joe rips up her floor and then suddenly she has stressed out box elder bugs everywhere going, "You need to be more stressed out." Um, Ixnay quantity over quality. Well, we'll get into that. We'll get into that. So, like, it's been a lot of news. There's been a lot of things in the news. There's been a lot of you know people noticing stupidity who weren't sort of acknowledging it before, and so it's just ironic that this, that this comes up at this time, right? And and that we sort of decided to do this, and then bang, it sort of pops out of the woodwork everywhere. And let me sort of show you what it looks like to be stuck, right? So I did my usual quote, right? If you believe you do not have a religion, one will be provided to you without your knowledge or consent. That's actually fairly well thought out, despite what you might believe. Um, and it's very precise and accurate because I tend to be precise in my speech. And somebody responded with, if you don't have a God you admit, the God is you. Now, this is stupid, binary, closed world, oversimplistic thinking. Okay. No, no, that's one option, right? If you don't admit you have a God, it might be you. That's true. But that's not the worst option because those people are narcissists. They're easy to spot. And while you can say there is uh, uh, an abundance of narcissism around, like we have like a flood of narcissists, uh, that they're not that dangerous because you can spot them easily, you can stop them easily. That there's methods, right? What's really dangerous is the people that are basically worshiping a god they don't understand, right? That's right, but they believe they're not because they're the dangerous ones, right? And that's where the stupidity comes in. And so, this guy's obviously, you know, midwit would be too much of an upgrade for him to handle. And that's you've got to recognize that. There's a lot of people that are smart in one area and dumb in all other areas, right? And then they take that intelligence, I mean, probably if I wanted to be super generous to Sam Harris, which, I really never do, but I'll try it this once. That's probably his thing, right? Like he's very good at tests, he was very good at school. And so he applied his logic, reason, and rationality, three tools that should never be applied to religion, and applied them to religion and spirituality or whatever the hell he calls it this week. And then you get this narcissistic jerk who actually is just dumb and doesn't understand basic concepts when they're presented to him by far more intelligent people. And that's the problem. He's a good example. And the thing is, though, that dumb people don't know they're dumb, right? They have no idea, right? And the people who think they know something can't compete with the people who know something. They can't. There's no way to do it, right? And it's hard when you're stupid to know that you were stupid. And the thing is, you can't make people less stupid. Education is not some magical system for making people equal or equally smart or equally intelligent or equally capable or equally competent. It doesn't do any of that, right? It can make you better within constraints. And that's the problem. Like we're just ignoring constraints so that we can get equality doctrine. And it's like, no, some people are only going to be as smart as they are. And there's extreme ends of that, right? There's people with Down syndrome and, you know, uh, people who are blind, they're never going to know sight, right? Whatever. It doesn't really matter. There's all kinds of spectrums of that too. And that's the problem. And so a lot of times people follow some pattern. They miss all the nuance. I've given you two examples of that already, right? And expect a result. And when they don't get it, they feel lied to, right? And you can see that in the young kids and well, some people in their 30s going to college, getting a degree, and not getting, a six-figure salary, a wife, and 3.2 kids. Okay. You thought you were following this pattern that you were told that was there. Of course, you missed all the nuance. You expected this result, and then you didn't get the results. And you're like, wait a minute, I was told if I followed this pattern, I'd get this thing. And it's like, yeah, well, maybe that pattern only works for certain types of people and not you, right? Because that's likely. Because most patterns, they have people that can do them, and other people can't do them, and that's the problem. But were they lied to? Because that's a harder question to ask, right? Like, were they lied to, or were they stupid and they didn't follow the instructions that they were given? And it's not clear. And the problem with understanding stupidity is that it happens for so many reasons, right? It's not some like closing condition, like, oh, they're stupid. It's like, no, smart people can be stupid because they're aimed at the wrong thing. And so if you are unknowingly to you aimed at, making Rust the de facto programming language in the kernel, and you don't really know that, then you just cast everybody who doesn't want that as being wrong, even when you're the person who's an idiot. Don't do that. Uh, if you need a memory safe language, that's fine. Don't put one in a kernel of anything ever, because that's dumb. And you're a bad software engineer if you don't know that. Just gonna let you know right now. Uh, I've been at it longer than you have, and I know more languages than you do. And that's just the way it is. And there's a technical reason for that, and you can plot it mathematically. So uh, why is there a discussion about this? Um, I mean, the answer's never going to fit, right? If you're in a situation of trying to justify your position and you just can't get it through to people, the overwhelming majority of the time it's because you're stupid and you're wrong. It's not because you're smarter than everybody else. That's that's unlikely. And that was actually Linus's answer to this guy, who's like, maybe the reason why no one agrees with you is because you're the problem. Right. Right. That was correct. Um, and the thing is, a lot of times people are talking about one issue and somebody else is talking about another issue and they're talking, quote, past each other. The thing is, if you're talking past somebody, one of you is the idiot, right? Because you're not able to understand that that's what's happening. And so that's a problem. And it's very hard to discern who the idiot is sometimes, especially if you're not able to pay attention to the details, which, as I said in the beginning, this video I saw on this dust up on the Linux kernel, that's what it was. The guy doing the video was not paying attention to the important details. And he seemed to see it. He didn't make the connect. No, 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 that's a lie. This guy keeps lying over and over again. He keeps saying, no, 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 the issue is you don't like Rust. And the other guy's saying, no, no, I like Rust. I just don't want any other languages. Rust, uh, probably C++, like probably Python, probably any language that's inappropriate for a kernel, because the only appropriate language for a kernel is actually C or assembly, by the way. He doesn't even want assembly in the kernel. Fair enough. I know why. I've done that work. You don't want two languages in your code base if you don't need them, which is weird, right? Because, and I said this in my video, like if you're building an application and you're only using one programming language, you're probably an idiot. But not a kernel and not an embedded system. Like, no, those are single language things, and we know which languages work best. And they're not modern languages, because modern languages tend to have features that you don't need anywhere else, right? You need them at the application layer. Yeah, maybe, sure, whatever. You want to be memory safe. I don't know. I'd prefer to be memory safe by writing memory safe code like a normal person. But if you need little training wheels on your software language, then go right ahead. Get your training wheels. I'm not mad about it. Like, who cares? That's your deficit, right? But if you don't recognize that as a deficit, that's a problem. And the guy who did the video didn't recognize the problems, right? He was just neutral reporting, and it didn't come across well at all. And that's the Sam Harris problem. If you don't take spirituality, religion, whatever seriously enough, if you don't understand that you saying you could write a cookbook and make it as popular as the Bible is an absurd thing to say that shows you don't know what you're talking about, then what are we going to do? I mean, no amount of laughter made it through his thick skull. It didn't happen. The opportunity was there, but it didn't happen. And the thing is, some stupid people believe they researched something when they never did. And it's like the curse of being me, right? Because I have a trick. It's called "shut up unless you know what you're talking about." I wish I had gotten that clip. There is a clip of me revealing the trick. Very funny, by the way. It's not that hard, right? Like, yeah, if you haven't researched it, just shut up. Let somebody else tell you and then you'll be a little smarter. Like, this isn't that hard. So most people like to yappity yap and fill the space. This is my space, by the way. That's filling the space. I created the space so that I could fill it because audience. Just I don't want any confusion with the stupid people. And the thing is, most stupid people confuse their feelings with being correct, right? Their feelings overwhelm them. They say, well, I feel a certain way about this, and therefore I must find a way to be right so that I can validate my own feelings. Right. And they get upset because their feelings aren't being validated. They're not getting upset because they're wrong, because they still don't believe they're wrong. We haven't gotten that far yet. Right? People are not rational creatures. People are capable of being rational for very short periods of time at a very high cost, but they're not rational creatures by default at all. And that's the thing. Right? But like all of us too, stupid people don't know what they're up to, man. They don't know. Jordan Peterson said that. You don't know what you're up to. Yeah, they don't know what they're up to. Right? Just to a larger degree. And that's the trick. It's not like you know what you're up to either all the time perfectly, right? You clearly don't, right? And of course, bias always makes all of us more stupid, and there's no way around it. Like, bias is a thing that we observe in the world, much like gravity. Maybe at high cost, with the cooperation of a lot of people, you can overcome gravity for a little while, right? And maybe the same is true of bias, right? So beware of anybody talking about overcoming bias, right? Because bias is something you just have to account for, like gravity. Now, maybe accounting for it means you can get around it a little bit for a little while, sure. But also, no, by and large, you just got to deal with it. It's best to understand what your biases are and state them up front and proceed as if. That's the best thing to do. That's the most honest way to approach the world. The closest to the truth. And the thing is, the internet is showing how stupid most people are. And to some extent, we've had the spell broken by the political dam being broken. And now all these things are becoming obvious, right? Like, how much propaganda, bad word, were we subjected to? Like, we knew some, right? But we didn't know to what extent. But now we know to what extent. It's like, wow, right? And you can see how easily people are fooled. Because say what you will, but the people who were saying, well, who were doing long form discussions and breaking down how like the thing wasn't true, were caught in the same trap. I was like, dude, you're buying the propaganda because you think these people were being serious when they told you that, when they knew they were lying all along and they just didn't care. Their rational arguments weren't going to make a difference to them or their listeners because they weren't arrived at rationally. So you're not going to dismantle it with rationality. That's not going to happen. And I'm not saying that never happens, but it doesn't happen very often, right? And the thing is, we all have equal access to technology. Oh no, that's not good. But all that does is exemplify our differences, right? Despite everybody trying to use technology to make us all equal, right? Through this age of gnosis thinking, right? Propositions as knowledge, as the highest value, right? As power, right? But wait, it's worse, right? If you order now. The more stupid people we have exemplifying their stupidity in the world, the more stupid people we have. Because you see them being stupid, right? Blake Lively sees Ryan Reynolds do his thing and take over this movie. She's like, aha, I can do that too, right? Disney sees Netflix and goes, aha, we should be in the streaming business. Yeah, all the streaming companies are going to fail, right? And if you need details on that, you can go to my personal channel. I have at least 1 or 2 videos on Netflix, right? They're doing something very specific. As far as I can tell, no one else is running the same business model from a technical perspective. And so no one else is going to make money streaming ever, right? Or at least they're not going to make Netflix money streaming. I mean, maybe they'll make a little bit, but they're not going to be particularly successful. And on the software side, everybody's following what they think is the Netflix model for software development. And microservices are failing left, right, and center for very good reasons. Mostly because it's not entirely what they're doing. They're just kind of lying about that. Also because it's a stupid way to develop software. So don't do that. Uh, Almost never are microservices correct. They can be useful in limited circumstances, but yeah, building your whole platform of microservices is about the dumbest idea I can think of. And this is all part of a larger trend of decentralization as a solution to centralization, which is totalitarianism somehow, even though that's not the way it worked. Um, sure, totalitarianism is going to happen, even in a decentralized system, by the way. So you're not fixing that way. But all centralization is not totalitarianism. Sorry, right? So don't tear it all down because we kind of need it. But the more people you have following patterns they don't understand, the more other people you're going to have following patterns they don't understand. That's just increased stupidity. Not a good situation. And that's why censorship is inevitable and required and a good thing when done by good people. When it's done by bad people, it's a bad thing. But since you're not getting rid of it, we should focus on getting it done by good people. Right. And in a twist of irony, uh, the Doge project is not a new initiative by the president. He used an existing congressional uh, institution, basically, and renamed it Doge. It had the same mission, right? But it's just being run by different people, and they're focusing on different things. And so it's not like you can dismantle Doge easily because it was enacted by Congress under Obama. Right, it just wasn't called Doge. So all he did was rename an existing group that was enacted by Congress already. Talk about using your enemy's tools against them, right? Smart business move, by the way. Very smart. And the thing is, a small number of fools make larger numbers of people more foolish, right? And laziness explains it all here, right? You see a successful fool being lazy. Maybe you don't know why they're successful. That might be important. And so you follow that pattern. And it's like, oh, that's not good. And the thing is, what people don't realize, the guy who did the research can spot the guy who didn't. Obviously, the guy who didn't do the research cannot tell the difference between him and someone who did the research. He can't tell, right? Psychological projection, inability to think bigger than you are. Obviously, you can't think past your capacity, right? That's kind of silly to think that you could. It's an asymmetrical world out there, right? People at the top can see the people down below them, right? And see them more clearly. And when you're looking up, you can't see clearly. Sorry. But you think you can because you're dumb. And that's the problem. And we've got a bunch of people trying to do things they aren't equipped to do. Now, why they're not equipped to do them might be any number of reasons, right? But trying to do things they're not equipped to do, and that's what makes you stupid, right? Try to go rock climbing without ropes. I don't know. You better have trained with ropes first. You probably didn't, right? And this is part of the equality doctrine, believing everyone is equal and treating them that way. Or worse yet, believing people can be made equal through education. I mean, come on. No, no, clearly not. Right. And we're not equal. Don't treat people as if we're equal. And they don't even believe that, right? Because, that person is less than you. So you should, well, then I shouldn't treat them equally then. That's what you're saying. Oh, okay. Good to know. Then, well, what does that mean though? Oh, I only treat the people lower than me not equal to me, and everybody else is equal to me? That doesn't make any sense. I'm at the top? Really? I'm at the top with all the other people at the top being equal, but we have to help the people below us? That sounds like elitism, because it is, by the way, but, you know, and elitists tend to be stupid. That's probably not a coincidence, right? And typically you're just talking about different things. I remember distinctly years ago, mom was still alive. She had a friend visit him. just right after the dust up over, free health insurance in the United States, which of course ended horrifically for us. Um, I asked her, like, what do you think insurance is? And she said, well, I'm not going to talk about that with you. I'm sure we don't agree. And I'm like, well, we don't have to agree on what insurance is, but like it does actually have a definition that has nothing to do with either of us, right? It's independent of us. Ooh, independent of the observer. Oh, that's the pattern. A lot of people, John Vervaeke talks about this. He doesn't use that term, but he should, right? Because it's more accurate and precise. It's a lot of what people are talking about, right? He says, well, what would you want to exist even if you weren't here? What a narcissistic thing to say. No, what exists whether you're here or not? Maybe those things existed before you got here. Oh, then your wants about whether or not it's here are irrelevant, like gravity. There are certainly times when I don't want gravity to be here, or at least not not to the extent that it is, because I want to be able to float up and cut some branches off a tree, and it's 10 feet high, and I'm not 10 feet tall. Um, but no one cares, right? And that's the interesting thing. So you can tell right in his framing that he's all messed up, right? You can't possibly get the right answers with an attitude like that. It's not possible, right? It's an asymmetrical world, and we're not freaking equal, and we can't make other people equal to us. In some cases, though, we can make them better, but that doesn't mean you can make them not stupid. Sometimes the answer is to recognize when you're stupid and what you're stupid about, and defer to someone else who isn't stupid about that thing, like the fucking Linux kernel. Want a Linux kernel written in Rust? Go write one. No one's stopping you. Start your own project. Why aren't you doing that? Oh, because you don't know what you're up to and you're a parasite and you don't actually want what you say you want. You want Rust. Well, go build stuff in Rust. Oh, you're not talented enough. Right. No one cares about your stupid project. Right. That's your problem. Leave the Linux kernel alone. It's been running great, written in pure C for decades. Leave it alone. This isn't that hard. Don't change Snow White into some stupid freaking leftist fantasy. What the hell's wrong with you? Don't character swap my movie because you want a woman to be stronger than a man when they're clearly not on average or really ever. Um, don't do that. Like, what are you doing? That's stupid. And the people who are smart see that it's stupid, and the people who are stupid don't. And the thing is, sometimes we get caught in a pattern of stupidity. In fact, misapplying a pattern causes stupidity. Once people find a pattern that seems to work for them in one domain, they apply it to another domain. And they immediately corrupt things with the pattern that they know by trying to apply it where it doesn't belong. Right? You can't run a charity like a business. You can't treat art like a money making operation. When you do these things, you corrupt them. Inevitably, it's a bad application of a pattern that works somewhere else. Pattern of business works great. If you're running a business, where it doesn't work, anywhere else. Like, actually, it's not to say you can't take some good things from running a business and apply them to government or to a charity. Of course, but they're all organizational issues. They're not they're not patterns of how you run a business. They're just like ways to organize things. And we don't see the difference because we're stupid. Discernment is hard. And it's pretty stupid when you apply a pattern someplace it doesn't belong. People make this mistake all the time. They think, oh, this guy ran a successful startup. We'll put him in charge of an already running business. Never works. Never. Because those two things have nothing in common. Building a business and running a a business once it's already up and running have no overlap at all. There's just none. Sorry. And you see this with production, right? So you can see USAID, USAID, right? They were using their position to manipulate the narrative, right? And to pay a bunch of people to say a bunch of things and to do a bunch of things in the world to make it look like these things were happening sort of spontaneously or whatever, right? Those of us who see patterns knew right away this was all coming from pretty much one or two places. That wasn't hard, right? It's hard for people who don't research things, and maybe you shouldn't research that. Like, I'm not saying like you didn't see this, bad on you. No, 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 no. Don't pay attention to this shit, right? But now someone else is in charge, right? And they're exposing what was happening, right? By a simple audit, accounting audit. Like, that's really all it is. It just so happens that the federal government's really good at keeping track of absolutely everything. Right? Go look up MilSpec. You've never seen MilSpec. Oh, I read some MilSpec once. Don't think I've recovered. And that's the thing. The people who were using the USAID tactic of narrative manipulation think that that's what Trump is doing. That's what Elon is doing, even though it's impossible because they dismantled that network. Their information's coming direct to you from them. Well, that's nothing like what USAID was doing. They were redirecting payments and paying third parties who are paying other third parties, so you didn't know where the money was coming from. But of course, the simple accounting audit all along could have revealed this, but they weren't doing that. Weird, huh? Must be a random coincidence, right? But that's how this stuff works. Like, the people who know that tactic think that's the tactic and there aren't any others. They're stupid. They don't realize, no, talking directly to the people and being honest is a different tactic. And you can do that. And it's not all of them. I mean, there's some smart, evil people out there. This is the problem with genius. Genius does not make you good, but it sure can increase the bad. And sometimes that's why you need to call out evil, right? Not try to redeem the actors of evil and say, oh, well, they were just writing the checks. They didn't know. I don't care. When you're in a position of responsibility, you should know. And the fact that you didn't know is as big a crime. Sorry, it has to be because the effects are as large. Now, maybe the punishment needs to change, although in this case, I would say absolutely under no circumstances, because you have a bigger responsibility than government. Within a business, it's a little bit different, depending upon the business and depending upon what we're talking about. And that's the other problem. Like, man, context is everything. And that's the thing. That's the problem. Don't try to redeem them. Because if you try to redeem people, how are they going to learn? Like, how do stupid people know they're stupid? If you just make excuses for them all the time, they'll think, oh, yeah, I'm smart. If not for this, if I had only known this, I would be smart. It's not that I'm not smart. It's that I didn't have proper access to. No, it's that you're not smart, dude. Sorry. You're just stupid. And there's certain things you can't understand in the world. In fact, almost all of it. It's okay. It's like everybody else, pretty much, except for the 1%, which you're not in. Because if you were, you'd know it. Like, it's not that hard. The reason why you're watching this is because you ain't in the 1%. I hate to break it to you. It's okay. It's okay. It gives you a bigger tribe. Like, not 1%. It's a way bigger tribe than 1%. It's fine. Right. But how will people stop being stupid and doing things that they shouldn't be doing if people keep making excuses for them? Just explain to me how that's supposed to work. And the thing is, it prevents us from doing the right thing, which is being your brother's keeper, right? We need to save stupid people because they will stray into evil more easily. They will do evil and not even notice it. They'll go right along with it, especially if they don't have boundaries. Stupid is bad enough, but smart people without boundaries, way worse, right? Or they don't like boundaries, or they rebel against boundaries. They won't notice evil, or how close they are to evil, or how close others are to evil, or to falling off the edge, or to going insane. They won't notice any of this stuff. This is why leftism and evil kind of go together hand in hand. Sorry. I mean, they're not the only things that do that, but also like overwhelming majority. I don't know. I mean, even historically, it's not that hard to see. It's right there, right? And you won't be able to show them how close they are to evil. You won't be able to show them how close they are to sending other people or themselves off the edge. You won't, right? Because you have to just tell them no. You cannot do this. We forbid it. Well, I don't understand why. I don't care. You don't need to understand. But for the good of the world, you need to stop. Because, yeah, a lot of people don't understand the implications of their behavior. No kidding. Welcome to Tuesday. And the thing is, these people have a flat world, right? It's linear, it's rationality all the way down. That's the only way anything happens to them, right? That's why they're conspiracy theorists. It's bad. It's really bad. It's really bad. But the thing is, like, you have to save the stupid people, the ignorant people, the incompetent people from themselves. You don't give a 2-year-old a chainsaw. If the 2-year-old gets near a chainsaw, you take them away from it. Like, this isn't that hard. We know this, but we're not doing it anymore for some freaking reason. We're not calling out evil. We're not calling out stupidity, right? Except me when I rant on my personal channel. And now you, dear Muppet, are stupid because you don't realize the extent to which understanding that we do not live in an objective material reality explains the world. When you understand that stupid people, no matter how smart they are, no matter how bright they are, no matter how big an IQ they have, no matter how well read they are, when you add in objective material reality, my friends, things get pretty freaking weird. People get really dumb really fast. Like really fast. It's sort of remarkable how quick people go from really smart to not being able to understand simple things in the world. Like even a little bit. Like completely like the basic stuff completely inaccessible to them. Completely. So here's a tweet. Probably can't really see it. I apologize for that. This is the best I could do. Um, Basically, he says, and this is in the middle of a discussion of me basically saying, objective materiality doesn't exist. You're right. This conversation is only happening inside of my brain as a subjective reality. What? Yet it's out there for all to see on the web, and we can agree on what's being said back and forth. What? Both are paradoxically true? What I don't know what definition of paradox he's using there. Just approached from different levels of reality? No, that's the same level of reality, you idiot. And then he says only subjective exists. Yet we interface to the objective. That's exactly backwards. And it's contrary to what he was saying earlier in the thread. But this is what happens with these people when they're stupid. They don't know. They have no idea what they're talking. The guy's not making any sense. He's contradicting his earlier statements in the thread. It's bad. It was really bad. I was like, what is wrong with this person? Like, I will pray for them. Like, it won't work, but like, I'll pray for them. Wow. But once you start seeing the objective material reality frame, you realize how many people are stuck in it. And I was like, oh, this explains why they're stupid, right? I mean, Sam Harris, like, oh yeah, he's just stuck in objective material reality. He can't imagine things that aren't material moving the world. And it's like, yeah, but material never moves anything in the world ever. Like you've got it exactly backwards, right? Subjectivity is what's in your head. Objectivity is the thing outside of your head as commonly used. This is why I think independent is a better word, right? And actually, I just released my animation finally, my Cabin and Bear animation there, which isn't, yep. So I did the animation. It's Ethan's story. Ethan did a wonderful job. We've been trying to do that for like 2 years now. It's like finally got AI to do it. AI is amazing sometimes. You just got to spend a lot of time with it. But hey, if you can't hire an artist, you can AI one. And that's the thing. Everything you see, all the bad stuff, objective material reality, right? And it's because no one will tell you that you're in over your head, right? No one will tell you other than, you can rise to the occasion. It's like, what if you can't? Because most people can't, right? I mean, Linus said to tell this guy, like, maybe the reason why no one agrees with you is because you're the problem. Yeah, maybe. Because in that case, it was certainly, it's not true in every case. It's certainly true in that case, right? And somehow you can overcome your bias, which, as I mentioned earlier, that's impossible. It's a good tell for an evil person. Whether they know they're being evil or not, I really, I don't care because I care about the evil and not about the knowledge or the ignorance or I care about the evil though, because that affects me and it affects the world. And what makes people stupid? Assumptions, right? Failure to discern. When you assume equality, you get stupidity. First discern, then judge, then act. 3 great live streams from over a year ago now. You should watch them all. They're wonderful. At least the monologues. The monologues are great. My monologues are awesome. I know because I do them and they're great. See how easy that was? Simple to know the truth. Good is hard and you are lazy. Maybe leave the good to the good people, right? Instead of trying to get it for yourself. That's not hard. Not hard at all. All crazy people are honest, right? Because sensing maliciousness is easy enough once you realize there's a difference between being malicious and crazy. However, this requires the proper use of logic, reason, and rationality. If you can't do that, if you can't tell crazy people from malicious people, fair enough. You better defer to somebody who can. And no, you're not smart enough to tell who that is. You're going to have to do it by observation and trust. Sorry. Those are your options. Because you don't know what you don't know. But somebody else does. And maybe they're wrong about that. Fair enough. But you'll never figure it out. So who cares? So why do we have all this confusion? Because we flipped universality around entirely. Universality exists. We're universal in spirit, but not in material. I don't know why everybody doesn't know this. It's in every poem or every reasonable poem. It's in every wisdom text. It's pretty much everywhere. And like, we're not thinking about it in those terms. We lack discernment. That's the problem. We just flat out lack discernment. No one's focused on discernment. Everyone's focused on telling you're equal, or you can rise to the occasion, or you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps, which is just more nonsense. Um, I mean, so how do we spot stupid? Right? Instead of engaging in cooperation through discussion, they engage in opposition through theorizing, which is another word for fantasy, by the way. Unless you're using it in the strict scientific sense and somebody uses theory, they mean fantasy. That's what they mean. Just swap the word out, world will make much more sense. Ad hominem attacks are a tell that people are out of their depth. Right? The reason why people go to ad hominem attacks is not because they don't have an argument or an argument doesn't exist. It's because even if an argument exists and they have it, right, they're inept. They're overridden by their emotions. And so Even if you're right, if you're overridden by your emotions, you shouldn't be in that conversation or debate or whatever it is, right? It's not necessarily bad faith, but it's ineptitude, it's incompetence. Fair enough. I mean, a lot of people are incompetent at most things. Big deal. Who cares? This is not interesting. What's interesting is, do you know your limits? And do you know where you belong and where you don't belong? Right? If you want to take an existing source base and change it to another language, why don't you just start from scratch and write your own thing in that language? That's a better answer in all cases. There's no excuse for another answer. None. Other than you're a parasite and a scumbag, probably a moron. Different problem. And these types of people are swayed by feelings over facts, right? So they expect you to be as well. So they figure if they jar you by attacking your character or attacking something about your argument, but not the actual argument, that you'll be swayed because that's how they were swayed in their position, after all. And they want their tribe to be larger. So they want that to be true for everybody. I don't blame them. If I were a scumbag, I'd want that to be true for me too. Unfortunately, I'm not a scumbag. Problem solved. Look at that. Right. And you got to remember, stupid people are especially stupid because they can't process facts. But everyone can process feelings to some extent. Not everybody can process facts, but everyone can process feelings. And some people can process facts only poorly. And we don't realize that. Right? We just kind of assume everyone's just as smart as we are. We all went to college. I didn't. And therefore, it's like, well, uh, it's a bad way to think about it. We shoved everybody into college, whether they could qualify or not. Right. And the thing is, what works for you won't work for stupid people. And what works for stupid people won't work for you. It's an asymmetrical world out there, kids. And difference matters, which is why discernment is so important. So-called relevance realization. You mean discernment? Yeah. Discernment happens first. And when you're not discerning, when you're making all these assumptions, you're going to fall into more errors than you need to. And often stupid people don't have a better explanation, but they don't like yours. That's a tell for stupid people because it made them feel bad. So they don't like your explanation. Oh, you make me feel bad. So I don't like anything you say. Oh, fair enough. Like, whatever. I don't care. Right? Oh, they get real upset when you don't care, by the way. Oh, tell the stupid people you don't care. Oh, my God. They get real angry because that's what they're going on. Unconsciously, they know this. Right. And so the asymmetry should make this easy to see, right? Like if you can't meet my argument with an equal argument, it could be wrong, but equal, right? Then that's kind of asymmetrical, right? If you meet my argument with uh, an appeal to newness, or why should we do everything the same old way, or that was yesterday's thinking, or it's the end of history, or some other retarded thing. It's an asymmetrical way to speak. You're speaking past one another. Yet no, people persist in being stupid, right? If you can't come up with an alternative explanation, but you don't like mine, you're the retard. Like you should submit to the person that has something when you don't. But at least you can spot them, right? I'll give you an example. So this is my midwit take for stupid people, right? Believing the dark ages refers to something physical or that there was dark in the world. It's more flat world thinking. Look, most people cannot think about the enchanted world, even if they experience it. And it's part of what we're dealing with here. If I'm talking about the enchanted world and you can't see it, well, you're going to come up with arguments as to why my enchanted world explanations don't seem to fit for you. Of course you are. And maybe you should, but you'll still be completely wrong about everything. But that's not my fault or my problem. They don't have the tools to appreciate the enchanted world, right? The Dark Ages is about a loss of knowledge pertaining to the tools, technologies, and concepts needed to run a large civilization, right? Not small civilizations, large civilizations, right? To maintain larger cultures, not small cultures, larger cultures. And this isn't that hard, right? The Enlightenment, therefore, because there's no enlightenment if there's no Dark Ages. Otherwise, what are you enlightening from? Right. And the Enlightenment people would love for you to think that you went from a baseline of knowledge and got an upgrade. No, you didn't. You went from less knowledge after Rome, after the fall of the Roman Empire, to about the same amount of knowledge as a result of the Enlightenment. And now we're starting over. That's what happened. That's the best way to understand what happened. Right? Because the Enlightenment, therefore, is a rediscovery, reinvention of these tools, technologies, and concepts like Plato and Aristotle. Because that's what happened, right? It was a rediscovery of texts and the fact that we now had a large population that enabled us to become enlightened. There's no reason to become enlightened if you don't need large cities. There's no impetus. It wouldn't do you any good. You're just wasting your time, right? It's like learning a programming language you're never going to program in. What are you doing? I mean, I'm not saying don't ever do that, right? Certainly when you're learning, you should learn Pascal, although I did quite a bit of programming in Pascal. Thank you very much. Even though it's not a used programming language, right? When you're learning, maybe you should learn Latin, even though it's not an in-use language anymore because the Catholic Church sucks. Hopefully, we'll fix that soon. Whatever. I mean, there are exceptions to the rule, but like, also don't do that. Like, don't buy a car you're never going to drive. Like, what are you thinking? Don't buy houses no one's ever going to live in. That's dumb. Like, what are you doing? Right? This isn't that hard. But it is for stupid people. It's impossible. Right? So that's why the Enlightenment matters. Like, and that's why a proper definition of it matters. And that's why the Dark Ages matter. You have to understand them in that way. Otherwise, there's an Enlightenment, there's no Dark Ages. We're clearly better off. We're not better off. What are you, high? Where have you been? Look around. And everyone goes, oh, this is a lot like the fall of the Roman Empire. Yeah, because we didn't pass Rome. So we're living in the fall of the Roman Empire still. Yeah, no kidding. That wasn't hard. Was that hard? That didn't seem hard. It wasn't hard. Then let me give you another sort of midwit example from the peanut gallery of retard history. There's a guy named William Ferguson, and he wrote a book called The Survey of European History. This book is used as a teaching book in Australia, or at least it was within the past like 50 years or so, 40 years. And it's a reference text, right? It's a historical reference text basically. Right. And in this book, he talks about how we shall never know what caused the population collapse in the 1300s in northern Germany. Oh, my goodness. Now, I mentioned this to 3 other people who weren't present for the original conversation, and they had exactly the same response that I had during the conversation, which was immediately interrupting, right? Which is the correct answer, by the way. When somebody says something that wrong, you should immediately stop them before they enchant themselves and their audience with more retarded stupidity, right? And the answer was no, the plague. Right, the plague. That is the correct answer. Yes, we do know. We know exactly what caused the population collapse in the area now known as northern Germany. It wasn't known by that name back then. It was the plague. Okay. Oh my God. Right. And the problem is not that Ferguson's stupid and didn't know this. That's a problem, right? It's not that some publisher let him publish this. That's another problem, and it's another layer of problem, by the way, right? Hierarchy is real and matters, right? Is that the book is being used with this obvious error in it. The person who quoted it to me is a teacher in Australia in the schools. He's a good guy, though. Like it's fine. I yelled at him and he said, "Oh, you're right. Fair enough." But also, like, what the hell? Like, there should be a correction issued. Like, why is this hard? So that stupidity is spreading through the schools in an entire country. Oh, we don't know what caused the populace. It's the freaking plague, dude. This is not hard. Oh my god. Like the stupidity spreads like the plague. And the intelligence, IQ, that's not going to save you from any of this, right? Like this is all orthogonal to IQ. I get to use one of the fancy Mensa words for you. All right. That's all I got for my monologue. I'm going to catch up on comments here. I had a great day today. I did like 4 things at once all day. I got outside. I had a bunch of cool stuff. And then right before I came on my throat, started bothering me again. I'm like, really? Really? All right, where are we at? Let's see. Handsoming, good to see you, sir. Narcissus was a silly old daffodil. True. Super magic fun whoopee. Okay. Could make yourself dumber and then are no longer stupid and life becomes nicer if only things work that way. What do you think about fool maxing? I don't know what that is. It sounds like a disease and you should see a doctor. Maybe get a cream or something. Yawn got it. Overstated stupidity. I understand intelligence. Or is it I understand stupidity and overstate intelligence? Oh my goodness. Yes, Yawn. Why do you do this to yourself and others? Super magic fun, Whoopi. How do you feel about Temple OS and the Holy See? Yeah, that guy went off the rails. This is the problem with brilliant people, often go off the rails. Uh, I will never forget the day I saw a 30-year-old man have a temper tantrum like a 4-year-old. That was Richard Stallman, by the way. Yeah, it was an interesting day. I was like, wait, what's happening? What did that just how is this possible? And then we said, no, no, we'll go to your restaurant. And then we did, and then he was fine. And I was like, what? Stallman's brilliant, by the way. Like, there's no question about it. Like, he's brilliant, but also very unstable. Very unstable. I have not run Temple OS though. I see no need. Super magic fun whoopee. I am the idiot. I am happy to admit, but can you please answer my question about full? Yeah, again, I don't know what full maxing is. Yes, you are impatient. Maybe you should work on that. Don, the monologue is not to be interrupted. Well, sometimes it is, but I can't interrupt it all the time. Uh, yeah, fair enough. Didn't realize you're in monologue mode. Right, we're out now. I got my favorite kind of bias is cognitive. Cognition is a bias all its own. Super magic fun whoopee. I see stupidity is a lack of genius. Yeah, but it's not. Like shadow is a lack of light. Yeah, but it's not. Stupidity pervades genius all the time. The dream is genius in itself. No, dreams are just dreams. Everybody dreams. So stupidity becomes an illusion if separate stupidity is not an illusion. No, that's just silly talk. No more brains, no more pro. It, it's not. Jan Godrat's onto something. Bacteria agree. No, mo brains, mo problems. Yeah, well, that's certainly true. That's certainly true. Super magic fun will be. Listen, I like to monologue as much as the next guy, but you're going in circles. No, I'm not. Become self-referential. Oh no, I never self-reference. And hard to follow, like what you're even saying. That's okay. That's not a ramble. My rambles are on my personal channel. You can see them all there. Hello, Mitchell. It's good to see you, sir. Did we miss you at the last book club or missed you at one of the book clubs? Don says, hello. I'm definitely stupid. Yes. But it's easier if you just go like, yeah, I'm dumb. I don't know anything about this. It makes life easier, right? Good old obfuscation. Well, yeah, obfuscation is great. I can't argue with that. Yeah, well, sometimes it's hard to argue. Mitchell, a child should be kept from a snake. Right, exactly. It's so weird. Like, we all know that we all talk this way, and then we, no, no, everybody should be educated and everybody should be allowed to code. And, oh, God, no, please, no. But words are fun. Yeah, well, I don't know about that. Sometimes. Don, cute story. I knew someone who bought the SpongeBob SquarePants tool belt for their 2 toddlers and thought it would be fun to give them real hammers. So one of them ended up in the ER because yeah, people, children are just small adults, right? I mean, it isn't that right? Like, aren't oh, I don't have it. Oh, shoot, I thought I had my clip. Damn it. Sorry, Sally, I don't have the women are not tiny men, men are not, what is it? Men are not large women. I don't have it. I don't know why. My bad. I should have it. Mitchell, people are stuck pursuing sensations and avoiding others. Yeah, then rationalizing their actions. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like when you're narcissistic, you'll pursue your own personal feelings over connections and relationships with others. And people don't like they don't realize, oh, that's part of what's going on, right? And if you misread narcissism as confidence when it's never actually confidence, you can see why people get attracted to narcissists. My ex would always resort to being arbiter of reality, blaming others and demonizing. Yeah, yeah, that's a common pattern, really. It's too bad, right? This is that individualism bug that everybody has. I'm an individual, but then it's your reality over everybody else's, and that's a bad plan. That's a bad plan. Ixon says, "Make Latin great again." Yes, make Latin everywhere again. Mitchell, bona sunta posse. I can't do it. I failed Latin, by the way. So, I mean, I failed it solidly for 4 years. But Don, your IQ will not save you. Should be on a cup. Okay, we can make your IQ will not save you and put it on a cup. I'm we can do that. We can totally do that. Yeah. All right. Wow. Now we come to the join me part. If you want to like hop in, I shall post the link. Feel free to do so. We can talk about this or maybe something else, as long as it's not too weird and personal. I don't mind finding out how your day went, but your paranoid conspiracy theory is probably not helpful. Ah, this tea, a little too chilly. That happens. Also, I did make it early. I had to reorganize my notes late because we had apple crisp after dinner because it's Valentine's Day, and I am absurdly spoiled. And yeah, I just plus I was doing 4 things all day. It's just glorious. I get so much work done today. It's amazing. Sally Joe, more information will not help. Your IQ will not save you. Well, the more information will not help video is recorded. It is being edited and shall be released soon. And I have another one too. I don't remember what it was. It'll come to me later, maybe. Yeah. So I was hoping for 3 videos in the can. I'm gonna have a third one. Probably gonna do it tomorrow or Sunday or something. It's a commentary style video. It's not a commentary video. It's a commentary style video to exemplify some of these more of these points. Right? This is somebody very very smart doing something very very stupid, completely unnecessary, just not seeing the connections. Right? Being stupid despite having a high IQ, being very well researched and well studied. Um, Ixnon. So, is the idea of using more than one language in a kernel a misapplication of the D&D 3.5 multi-classing pattern? I don't remember my D&D 3.5 that well, although at one time I knew some of it at least. No, I mean, the bottom line is it's just a mathematical certainty that if you only have to manage one language in a build, that's easier than managing 2. It's just like literally a math problem. Um, the number of problems introduced into a build by just using one other language in one small section is greater than the number of problems that may be incurred by not having that language feature and having to repeat code over and over again elsewhere. Also, it's really dumb, right? Because like, well, you have to repeat this code. Okay, you have version control and libraries. Like, no, you don't have to repeat the code. And if you do, you're a bad software engineer who doesn't know how to avoid retyping code. Call it as a library, idiot. Why is this hard for you? I don't understand. There's 1,000 ways around this. The other way is to soft link the code so it always gets linked. Like there's so many ways to fix this problem, and that's what they're bitching about. And I'm like, it doesn't even matter because the number of problems you create by not duplicating that code is greater than the number of problems you create by duplicating the code. The fact that you're like, we'll maintain it. It's like, no, you just want maintenance rights. The maintenance is less if you do it the way they're proposing with single language. So, yeah, it's just all dumb. Like, it's all stupid. It's all like, and it really, look, I'm sure they're very smart. They're just not as smart as the kernel people. Like, that's why they're using a memory safe language. Oh, C isn't memory safe. Yeah. And if you're a good programmer, it doesn't matter because you can make it memory safe if you're a good enough programmer. And if you're not, you program in Rust like a little girl with training wheels. It's fine, dude. Like you do you. Also, little girl with training wheels. Go away. Uh, Get lost. Like, you're not going to manage. And the funny part is, apparently there is a project that wrote a kernel in Rust. Go work on their stuff, man. It's fine. We won't miss you. Go away. Who cares? Play in your own sandbox. So stupid. I hate stupid people. I hate them. It drives me nuts. Mitchell Clark. Asking, demanding, beg, earnestly, requesting all the good things. Ah, okay. Oh yeah, Bona. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I probably don't know those other 2 words. I feel like I'd recognize them if I'd ever run across them. That might be wrong. My Latin days are long behind me, but I have a buddy, right? Like this is what I mean by like it's like this is the problem, right? Like I look at Eric Weinstein, I'm like, whatever. I know 100 of those people at MIT, right? Like, he's not that smart. So my buddy, like, here's one of the things he did. He said he was in college and he ran across Nietzsche and he decided he had to learn German so he could read Nietzsche in the original language. And I was like, are you okay? And then like he's a math freaking whiz, right? Like hardcore math whiz. And then like one day, and this wasn't that long ago, right? So he had been out of college for a good 25 years by this point. 25 years. I posted something in Latin that I I did, and I had Google look at it, and Google rearranged it for me, and I just wasn't on top. I mean, this is years after I took Latin, right? And I posted it on Facebook, and he goes, "Where did you learn your Latin? It's blah blah blah." And I know he hasn't done Latin since he left college, and I'm like, "How the effing hell did you remember proper Latin grammar that you haven't touched in 25 years?" I hate you. I hate him. I hate him. He's terrible, horrible person. He's unbelievably bright. He's like ridiculously smart. I'm like, go away. I don't want to be around you anymore. It's terrible. It's awful. People like that shouldn't be allowed to exist. Come on. Like, what are we doing to the world? Mitchell. Meanwhile, my players understand 5 languages and use comprehended language. Yeah, well, whatever. Um, I hate people. And it's ecclesiastical Latin, which is different, I guess. Yeah, well, it is actually. Yeah, yeah. To be fair, ecclesiastical Latin is not what I learned. It's funny, right? Because I was always like, how do I know all this history? Oh, because it's Latin, and all the Latin texts that we were reading were historical texts. So it's probably the only reason why I got D's in Latin and not F's. I never got an F in Latin, but I got D's. I think I got nothing but D's. Actually, if I remember correctly, but the way they were teaching the language, I'm like, what are you guys talking? Because they're like, well, it's the future perfect participle, and I'm like, is that in Latin? Because I don't recognize that from English. right? Because I didn't learn English that way. Like nobody taught me English grammar by telling me what is the future perfect participle. What? What are you talking about? Like, oh, this is an adjective and not an adverb. I'm like, I don't know what those things are. What are you talking about? I just read and spoke English. Like I don't. And so they're trying to teach these. French was abominable because French was weird, right? I had this French teacher, and most effeminate person I've ever seen in my life to this day was my French teacher in freshman high school at Austin Prep. Like unbelievable. This guy was he was so effeminate that and my problem was he would not pronounce my name correctly. I'm like, it's Lefevre. My grandfather was very big on this, even though we're French Canadian, basically. He said, like, no, 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 we're American now, and we changed our name. We don't pronounce it Lefebvre, right? Or Lefebvre. We pronounce it Lefevre because that's the American way, which of course it was. It was made up, but whatever. Like that was like, we're changing our identity to Americans, damn it. And that's what we're doing. Right. And he used to love to sing the Canadian French national anthem, right? But like, no, I mean, we were Americans, and this guy did not pronounce my name correctly, and I was just bullshit. I was pissed. I'm like, dude, disrespectful, yo, right? This guy was so effeminate that one day he said something about his wife and his kids or something, and like the entire room fell completely silent, and he went, "What?" Just like that, and I was just like, and then he figured it out, like, "You don't believe I have a wife?" And it was just like, "We believe you are the wife," but, like, I mean, I have never since even heard of a freshman high high school class being as silent as we were that day. He Oh my god, what an effeminate human being. Like, it was unbelievable. He was more effeminate than any woman I've ever met. It was bad. Oh my goodness. Mitchell Clark, what's a superlative anyways? I couldn't tell you. I don't like everybody else. Like I knew a bunch of people that they were like, "Oh yeah, we know what this is." I'm like, What are you I didn't learn any of this in grammar school. What are you talking about?" They were, meantime, the only reason why I actually got into private uh high school, junior high, and then high school was because I smoked the test so badly I screwed up the bell curve for everybody else. So they were like, "You have, like, college level English." I'm like, "Yeah, well, my father's a PhD in English Lit, so that might have something to do with it." I don't know. But also, like, yeah, I remember being pissed off. I was in junior high and I'm going to private school, so we had to buy our books. I bought all my books 2 weeks before, right? I went home and read them all, and then I get in there, and they're like, "Well, we're only gonna cover half the book this year." And I'm like, "Bro, I read the whole thing. What do you mean you're only gonna cover half? I thought we were gonna get more books. Like, I don't This is all we're gonna do. We're only gonna do half of this? I already did it." And then I just screwed off in class because I already read the book. So plus I didn't know this back then, but it turns out I can pay attention to things at the same time with really good fidelity, like really good. And other people can't, which I didn't know back then. So they had to move my buddy away from me because he was getting bad grades. And once he moved away from me, he got fine grades. I was like, oh well, whatever. I was just screwing off but I could hear every word the professor was it was bad. I, I didn't know. I had no idea. I was giving him bad grades. Um yeah. Mitchell Clark. I speak fluent English. I don't know English well. I know English pretty well. I don't know how to break it down and I mean, I remember struggling with diagramming sentences. I'm like, "What are you doing to the why would you do this to this beautiful language? Like, this is not how language is supposed to flow. It's not supposed to be broken up into trees. Like, language isn't a tree. What is wrong with people?" And yet, this is what we did to our poor children. At least that's what they did to me in school. Oh, I forgot to pin my link. Let me pin my link on navigating patterns here, which is the only place I can pin my link. There we go. So if you want to join, you can grab that link. Now that I've pinned it on navigating patterns. Um, yeah, I mean, freaking language, just the way they teach language just drives me nuts. Right? Because I know 8 programming languages. That was nothing. And of course, I knew what I was doing. I picked up all the core concepts first, but after I learned basic, because you learn basic because you're never going to learn a computer language. Basic is awesome, but yeah, it's no good. Oh, here we go. Ixanon has us beat. I speak American, not even one language. Fair. It's like fair. Sally Joe. English curriculum is a US aid program. Maybe. Maybe that's what was wrong with it. Yeah, it was a mess. It was a mess when they were teaching other languages. When I was at Austrian Prep my freshman year, our homeroom teacher was a Russian teacher. And he said, "I'm gonna teach you Russian in homeroom." And I was all excited. He never did it. I'm like, son of a bitch. I would have loved to have learned Russian. That would have been cool. I don't know that I could have though. I probably couldn't have. It was weird too. In junior high, one of the teachers he didn't teach Latin. I think he taught like Spanish, French, German, and Italian or something, although Italian and Spanish are pretty close. But he fluently spoke at least 4 languages. And then one day he was like leaving the school and he was like, "Yeah, I'm going to go into computer programming." I was like, I thought that was funny because my path was the opposite, could not learn a single other. I still don't know any languages, right? I barely know English. My path was the opposite. I go learn 8 computer languages like it's nothing. Right. But it's a deliberate strat. I mean, computer languages are much smaller and easier. You know what would make a great computer language? Latin. Latin would make a fantastic computer language because it's so discrete and spelled out and linear. And yeah, sum est, sumus etis sunt, right? And then all the way up. It's crazy. It was good too, I think, not learning Latin very well. Because the verb to be turns out to be a very important concept that doesn't play well when you get to English. Bruce, my man.
Hey, how's it going?
You did it. You did. I hadn't
did.
seen you. You talked about this trimming,
I know. It's
but
a
I
shame.
hadn't seen it.
Yeah. It seems to be that time of my life to stop clinging on to thin hair. So, I'm a heartbeat away from neo-Nazi.
Excellent.
Or Mark. Right. I'll probably keep the beard though. I can't go clean shaven.
Okay.
But anyway, I'm here to defend the study of parts of speech, in tenses and all the above, to some degree. If you're looking to, there are some reasons for this. I think that we've lost and actually it's rarely taught today when you're learning English grammar. It's mostly it's taught, obviously people learn it by native language immersion, right? And so that's pretty common. But when you're doing the work, so for instance, if you're doing the scholastic work that requires the use of language in such a precise way, you have to know those sorts of things. So in other words, if you're playing the game, the rules are sort of set. And so then when you learn a foreign language, the association comes. And if you're not immersed in that foreign language, why learn it? And the reason would be if you're doing the scholastic work of translation or reading or things like that. For instance, how would you learn Latin if you weren't speaking it on a regular basis? Or let's say Old Greek or Hebrew or something like that. It's the academics that do that to some degree because we don't have a way of doing it without context. So if you're in that game, you kind of have to learn it that way.
If you're in that game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was never going to be in that game. But they made me learn it that way anyway, and then it didn't work because
they don't have other tools. They don't have other tools to teach people but one real way with regards to that, unless they threw you in France, right?
Well, I mean, I would argue no, because actually I would say I did it the way I did computer language, just dive in and do the thing, which you can do in Latin if you just read the texts.
Latin's a little easier probably than others because it's pretty how can I say, it's very like it's almost like static typed code or something.
It is,
So you
right,
have,
that's what I was
you know,
saying. It would make a
right.
great computer language.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
I'm sure
It's
someone's
I
tried that.
it's extremely well typed. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
exactly what it is.
yeah.
It
So
makes
but
it it makes a
it's
good case
tough.
for strongly typed computer language, which is the right answer, by the way. All other answers are completely wrong, incidentally, but that's
I'm
okay.
sure someone's done it. If not, that's a great idea.
Oh,
You
yeah,
know,
there are strongly typed languages, yeah.
I mean, for like Latin specifically as a language, a coding
Oh, I
language.
don't know about that.
But I don't know how you learn a language without immersion or this sort of when I mean learn, I mean to relate it to yours um
Yeah,
without
no,
that option, you know.
I do. I don't know where the book is. It's not in here. It's in the shed for sure. But like my mother bought me. Actually, I do have an example. Hold on. Let me grab it. Yeah, no. They have exactly the way to do it. They're called lobes. This is a lobe. Oops. Right. And so what are lobes? Lobes are this is a red one, so it's Latin. It's Latin on one page and English on the other, bro.
Yeah.
The green ones are Greek on one page and English on the other. That's how you do it. And I have a French copy of Harry Potter somewhere that my mother bought me a million years ago to get me to learn French. And of
Yes.
course, I just
I
never
see.
picked it up.
Yep. I get what you're saying. So there's the side by side, so you're doing the comparison.
Right.
And so you're that but that really is like learning a coding language, right? At that point, if you're doing it that way.
Maybe. Ixnon, Mark, Latin should be a programming language. Also, I can't learn Latin Lefebvre. Well, not the way they taught it, Ixnon. So don't play that game with me.
I find it
Sally Joe, hold
fascinating.
on.
Yeah,
Let
go
me
ahead,
do the
go ahead, go
Sally
ahead.
Joe. How do I know if a person is too stupid to help? Oh, that's a good question, Sally. The problem with stupidity is that if you're not looking for it, and this is really the problem is people aren't looking for this stuff. And it's like, the key is to assume stupidity and look for it. And then it's like, oh, right. It doesn't like you can believe someone's stupid and not treat them poorly. That's actually not that hard, believe it or not. It's easier to treat somebody better if you think they're stupid, right? Because you can, but you need to be charitable, and that requires like I think the problem with being properly charitable or proper caritas, which is the much better word, uh, is that and this is the thing people don't realize to be charitable requires humility. Like, and just almost everybody lacks humility nowadays, and so they're not charitable by default. But if you thought people were stupid and you were humble, you would treat them more charitably by default. Of course you would. Of course, that's not a Christian ethic. Like that's a human being thing. Like as a functional
Yeah.
human, right? And because we're not treating people stupid, we're treating people equal all the time. We're really not treating them as charitably as we should. And so we're not looking for their deficits, right? We're just assuming they don't have any. And so the skill, to be fair, Sally, the skill of discerning whether or not someone can help is not available to us, not because we've never had it or we don't have it now, but because it's atrophied because we aren't using it anymore. We're just kind of assuming that people can help. And
Yeah.
I think once you just drop that assumption, it'll come to you pretty quickly. But go ahead, Bruce.
No, it makes some sense. I would say a few things. It's not obvious that people are it's not obvious that people are not the same. Um
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
in some sense. I
Right?
don't know
That's
that
true.
any other worldview gives what I would consider to be two things to consider other than maybe the Christian worldview, which is the fact that you have relevance, importance, and meaning, right? Because you're an image bearer, and you're also flawed, and everyone's flawed.
Well, everyone else.
Everyone,
No, everyone else. You're missing the else, Bruce.
everyone, yeah. So the humility is built in. As it should be, right? Rightly oriented or at least I would say rightly taught, it should be built in. But I'm not entirely sure. Humility is, or the fact that, in other words, treating someone as though they don't know things, like without assumptions. It's really hard to do. I think for many people, to discern that. And in fact, it's what separates, I think, quality conversationalists from, or, decent relationships, or people that can start up a conversation with anyone, is the lack of assumptions that they bring to the table. If
Right.
you're able to remove that to some degree, now you can really engage, because you don't know what they know or
Right.
don't
Right.
know.
Right. And
Yeah.
you don't know what they mean by the words they're using. Right.
Mhm.
And that's because you don't know the content or the definition that they're using for the word, and usually don't know what context they're giving it in. And
Exactly.
when you get confusing context, you get like that conversation I showed earlier, right? Where the guy's literally switching around objective and subjective because he got himself confused and he was trying to talk about something that he'd never thought about. And I had already trounced him in the argument earlier with, no, you're being dumb and don't do this, in a very nice way, by the way. That's the thing. Like, no, you're mean. Like, bro, you haven't seen me mean. You'd know if you saw me mean, you'd cry. And I don't. I'm not like being hyperbolic about that. I can easily make most people cry. Like that is not even remotely difficult for me to do. And the fact that I don't do it means you owe me a medal, and that's all that means. And I'm not mad you're not giving me one, but also like let's be a little realistic here, huh? Like just a little. But let's see. What Sally say? How many stupid types are there? Emotional, informational, physical. Look, stupidity manifests, right? Stupidity is not a condition. Stupidity is a manifestation, right? It can be a manifestation of following a pattern that doesn't apply. It can be a manifestation of ignorance, right? Sam Harris is deeply ignorant about something that he's talking about. He manifests stupidity, right? Stupidity is a manifestation. So stupidity comes about through a bunch of different things, as I mentioned earlier, right? So when you have confidence but no competence, stupidity will manifest, right? But it doesn't manifest before that, right? And so if you think you know what you're talking about and you make a retarded statement like, "Oh, no, bro, we'll duplicate more code on the Rust side if you don't let us put Rust in the kernel, then problems will create on the kernel side." That mathematically could not possibly be the case at all, right? "Oh, we'll maintain the whole thing." No, you won't, because you don't even know that what you're proposing is dumb. And so, like, stupid people don't see that they're stupid. So how did that manifest? Well, that in that case, look, these guys want control of a code base that they had nothing to do with for years, right? Had nothing to do with. And now they want control of the code base. I get it. They're parasites, they're leeches, and they're low IQ people. I understand. They don't understand, right? And so the stupidity didn't manifest because they probably write really good Rust code. Fair. I can't write really good Rust code. I also wouldn't want to, but like whatever. Like, I'm never gonna write Rust, so I don't want a memory safe language. If I can't write my code memory safe in C, it's time for me to stop writing C. Like that's all that means. It doesn't mean anything else. Like I'm cool with that, right? and these people don't know, right? Like a lot of people, like it's not stupid if you go to like build a staircase as a carpenter if you've never done it before, right? But that's one of the hardest things you can do in carpentry, by the way. That and joints, right? Like there's many different types of joining that you can do in carpentry. They're all hard, right? So joints and staircases, two hardest things in carpentry, or so I'm told. And so when you build your first staircase and you expect it to be perfect, you're stupid. When you build your first staircase and you realize you're a muppet, there's no stupidity manifests.
Right.
Like, and so the stupidity is in the manifestation. And so it's not a type, right? It's not an emotional, informational,
Yeah.
physical thing,
Yeah.
because it's a manifestation that can happen through any number of mechanisms. It's like homelessness, right? The manifestation looks the same, but it has 6 or 10 or 12 different causes.
Yeah, I think
And
you see that all over now. There's a materialistic attempt to divide up the differences in people's personality, sin, whatever you want to call it, right? They're flaws or accelerations. So they'll say physical or emotional or spiritual, and they'll do this sort of dividing or dualistic, sort of thing, right? So it's like, oh, I'm physically smart, whatever that means, but I'm emotionally dumb. I don't think that's a fair assessment. I think it does people a disservice to some degree. The manifestation of your lack of humility, otherwise, happens in all aspects to whatever degree. So,
and stupidity is usually a function of bad relationship as such. So, like I was saying, if your relationship with your object that with building a staircase for the first time as a new carpenter is that it's going to be perfect, then you're stupid. But if your relationship with building that staircase is, well, I don't know, this is really hard and I've never done it before, then you're not stupid because you knew you were trying. You knew there was a good chance of failure. You had humility. And so stupidity never manifests if you have proper humility.
Yeah, the way of I would say I think it's like Proverbs 15 or something that says effectively this is the Bruce translation. It says the fool is right in his own eyes. Right? The stupid person is right in the mirror. The wisdom of man comes through humility, right? Or understanding his flaws. And someone that assumes perfection in the first time, or really any time, but especially the first time, this is stupid. And I think there are some people that would say, like, well, there's autistic people that assume perfection because they're so used to winning video games, whatever that is, right? That it's still stupid. Like, it doesn't just because someone has a malady doesn't change the manifested behavior, right? We still have to navigate it. We have to navigate that stupid pattern, as to stay with the theme here. So
yeah, exactly. Well, I think, Bruce, what you were talking about earlier, there was a great conversation between J.P. Marceau and Jonathan Peugeot, my two French Canadian friends. Like, the three of us just proved that the French Canadians are God's chosen people, obviously. But in there, he's talking about the materialist reductionism causing the meaning crisis. Now, I get my disagreements with some of his thesis, although he's mostly correct. But he gave a brilliant explanation for why this happens, by the way, in the talk, which I thought was just great. I left a big comment on it, of course. And one of the things he was talking about that we've talked about before, that's actually really smart, is that science was really successful for a long time. And there are problems that you solve by dividing up the world, right? And then treating those things as problems and finding solutions to them. Now, the thing that people don't realize, and it's very hard to see, it does make you stupid, is that almost never works, right? Because you only see the successful experiments. You don't see the failures. And so you don't realize that almost never works. It almost never works to, like, even something banal like the history of aviation. Like, go to Kitty Hawk. I've been to Kitty Hawk now. It's awesome. By the way, go to Kitty Hawk. Man, it's that cool. Go to the Outer Banks anyway, but like, go to Kitty Hawk, right? There's like a dozen people working on flight all at the same time. Everybody knows it's going to be solved, right? But it's only the Wright brothers that understand the three main problems and treat them as three problems that need to be solved in parallel, right? In cooperation with one another. And that's why they're the successful ones, right?
Yeah.
And then we don't realize how significant that is, that Kitty Hawk, as my buddy who lives right down the road, 10 minutes down the road, told me, that is a triumph of engineering, not science, by the way. It's a triumph of the science of flight had already been worked out. And you can put that back at Da Vinci if you want. That would be fair, actually. Or you can put it more recently. It doesn't really matter. The science of flight was worked out. It was the engineering challenge of flight that hadn't been worked through. That's what the Wright brothers did. And then you find out how spectacularly unsuccessful the successful flight actually was. And you're like, really, bro? I wouldn't put any stock in that company. We went 90 feet, 10 feet off the ground from a hill, 30 feet higher. No, it's got to be higher than that. I forget how high it is. But like, it's like not very impressive, actually.
It's like, yeah, a good breeze would move you that far,
Right.
Yeah,
Really?
yeah, right.
Yeah. And you needed a motor for this, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
That's not a
I
good sign.
I could do that any day of the week with a sheet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not that bad, but
Yeah.
it's almost that bad.
Right.
And you get to climb the hill, and like they climbed up the hill with the whole
Yeah.
thing, and it wasn't
Sure.
small. Yeah, it's pretty wild. Let me address Sally's question. Sally Joe, what should you take as an indicator that the stupidity is yours in a given thing? See, here's the problem: stupid people can't know they're stupid, right? So at some point, at an impasse, someone has to give up, right? Now the question is, is this something, Sally, you're already very good at this to some extent, right? Is this something when you're talking to somebody that you can give up on? Like Bruce, for example, cited the Bruce translation, right? And as we all know, it's not the original Dutch, so very suspect. But like he gave that bias, that caveat up front, right? As a way to go with trust. The best way to know if you're the stupid one in the situation is to pay attention not to emotion or the amount of emotion, but your emotional valence, right? Which is, does it make you feel sad or angry at the person? Right. And a lot of people confuse angry at the person for frustrated, right? So the thing that I get all the time in talking to people is frustrated and the reason why I'm not frustrated at them, I'm frustrated because somehow I'm speaking words and they're hearing something else. And I'm just like, why is there this huge disconnect between the words I'm using and the things they're telling me I'm saying, which no overlap at all. And this is independently observable, by the way. Like if you're in some of these conversations, you're like, wait a minute, Mark didn't use any of those words. Like, what is this person talking about? Right. So I'm frustrated. I'm not angry. And people often misread frustration for anger. Fair enough. Like frustration can cause anger, but I very rarely get angry. If I'm angry, you'll know it. First of all, the swearing has been going on for some time before I get angry. And I am perfectly capable of using nothing but swear words and still communicating perfectly clearly, which is, that's a skill. Thank you very much. Then if I get angry, you'll know it from there. But that's the indicator. So, just so you know.
Yeah. I think also a good indication of true anger is if, well, at least in my case and many other people, is a lack of speech. So it's over. Yeah. Original Dutch.
You have transgressed, Bruce.
I've got to work on it.
The only answer.
I've got to get
I didn't think Manuel was up. I told him to go to sleep and say good night. So I don't know why he's up. But I am glad.
Yeah, what I say? It spite me. I'm sorry, which is how you would say it. I think that's how you would say it in Dutch, something like that. His spite me or something.
Yeah, I go poo-pooing the first airplane is so 20% chronological snobbery. Yes.
He is asleep. Oh, okay.
Oh no, Sally Joe. Oh no, the answer can't be understanding feelings. No. Sally, all of your problems. That is all.
Well, to some degree, that's why the people that have that sort of social awkwardness or Aspergery personality, whatever you want to call it, are valuable because they don't self-censor when they're trying to engineer something.
That's right.
Right? It's kind of useful to have.
Oh yeah, no, it can be extremely useful. Well, also if they are functional, if they don't get overwhelmed by emotions or overwhelmed by change, they're the ones that get things done. I mean, that's why Elon Musk gets things done. It's maybe not the only reason, but also Ixnon, people often respond to what they want you to have said. Right. Yeah. Well, they're having a conversation with themselves. Yeah. And Ixnon, I got to tell you, look, I mean, it's always hard that I have to do this. I measure things rather precisely. Thank you very much. I'm the guy who counts not only how many minutes, but how many cars between me and certain known objects to measure traffic, right? I did that in Boston to great effect. I could tell you in Eastern Massachusetts, tell me where in Eastern Massachusetts you were and where you wanted to go, what time you wanted to leave, and I could tell you almost exactly how long it would take for any 2 points. pretty reliably, actually. People were always like, how do you do that? And I'm like, how do you not know this? And I just like, it was an impasse, right? But I actually did, like, I count things. This phenomena has been growing for 40 years. It's gotten worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And in the past 20 years in particular, it picked up, right? I don't want to say 2004, but I'm going to say it anyway. Thereabouts, things started to get really bad where people were projecting more, psychologically projecting. They were hearing things that I wasn't saying, and they weren't hearing what I was saying. And that just has increased. And in the past, like 6 years, I'd say in particular, maybe 7, yeah, 7 years is probably more. Like, it just exploded. Like, absolutely. It's an exponential curve anyway, but like we're at the tail end of that curve now, and it's bad. Like, it's really bad. People did not do this before. I promise you. People did not do this as often before. There were always people that did this. Like, I knew them, right? That, like I said, like, the reason why I'm not impressed with Eric Weinstein is because I know 100 people as smart or smarter than him for real. Easily, easily. I mean, I was in Boston. I traveled in those circles. It's really not that unusual to have a 135, 140, 150 IQ and be at MIT. And, you know, I mean, I don't really like to talk about it, but the reason why I think these people are drooling idiots is because my stepfather had an unrecorded IQ. Okay. So when you talk about these other people, I'm like, just give them a bib and a baby spoon and they'll be fine. Like, I'm just not impressed with any of them. And I'm not going to be. Like, I'm just not going to be. My mother had this joke where she was just like, you know, your stepfather just knows everything. The only thing he doesn't know about is like knitting, crocheting, and cooking. And of course, he heard this once. So he went and read everything he could on those topics just to like screw with my mother, which, you know, wasn't a national pastime, or at least should have been. And hilarity ensued. Believe me, hilarity ensued. Yeah, I mean, this guy would like, yeah, I don't even. And the thing was, he could explain anything to me. Like, because I would have just dumb questions, right? I'm a teenager. I have dumb questions. Like, so, you know, what is this whole thing about MOND, right? Which is modified Newtonian dynamics, which is an alternative explanation to dark matter, by the way. Yeah, when I was 16. By the way, it was a long time ago. No one knew what dark matter was back then. I did. Also, I had access to all his books, so that might have something to do with it. And he was a physicist, so, you know. So he explained MOND to me, and I was like, oh, okay. The only thing he couldn't explain to me was relativity. And the only reason he couldn't explain relativity to me is every time he explained it to me, I was like, that can't be a big breakthrough. Einstein sounds like retarded. Because I always thought, like, now that I understand relativity, I'm like, oh, no, that was retarded. It was really obvious point. The thing that he did was the math, right? And the best way to understand relativity is to ignore all the books about Einstein and just deal with the thought experiments that he did. And then you'd be like, oh, that's kind of obvious. Also cool that you could do it in math, but it doesn't help. It doesn't help. Young God, the most interesting man in the universe, everyone. No, not even close. Very unassuming, but like would answer questions. And like a lot of the people at MIT were incapable of answering questions because they could not condescend. They could not talk at your level. They had to talk at their level because they were used to talking to their colleagues. And mostly they were used to arguing with their colleagues. So if you asked them a question out of ignorance, they would argue with you as to why you were wrong for not knowing the answer. Like, that's the way they talked naturally. And so when people do that to me, I'm usually very much like, yeah, whatever, it's Tuesday, because I'm used to that interaction. And you could call it an autistic interaction, although I think that's actually horrifically unfair. Like, I think that in order to play at that level, because we have cognitive limits, you can play at that level and not, like, the room to know socialization rules has been squeezed out of your head by facts. Like, I think that's a better model. It's not a perfect model. There is autism. Like, I get it. Like, Mind Blindness is a good book by Simon Baron Cohen. That's Sacha Baron Cohen's cousin or something, by the way. Totally different person. Read Mind Blindness. So it's a great book. Like, read Mind Blindness anyway, if you're not interested in autism. It's a fascinating book. It's a small book too. I think everything in there is actually correct, although it's been a while, but I'm fairly sure it's almost all correct. But like, one of the things you start to come to understand over time is, and I've talked about cognitive load before, there are cognitive limits. You do have a total cognitive load. And if you fill that cognitive load up with logic, reason, and rationality, you can't do emotional things. You can't understand spirituality. You can't understand the ethereal world because you just filled it up wrong. And you can say, Mark, that's silly, blah, blah. Read the work of Dale Farron. Dale Farron, she has the goods. This shows up in the literature, in research. It's there. Basically, if you take a child and you send a child to a preschool that is like more time sitting at a desk, right? Or even it's so stark, right, with children, because the exponential curve thing I was talking about, right? The Pareto, it's a Cauchy distribution. The Pareto principle kicks in, right? So if you just take the set of kids that go to kindergarten early because of their birthday versus kids that go to kindergarten a year later because of their birthday, the ones that go later have better outcomes. Why? Because they're not sitting at a desk for as much of their life, basically, right? Or as much of their young life. In other words, she's shown in the research, if kids are playing, right? If they're doing rough and tumble play, as Peterson calls them, I'm surprised he doesn't know this research, or maybe he does, he doesn't mention it, right? Like, if they do that enough when they're young, they have better outcomes. Like, what comes later is actually quite irrelevant, because you can understand logic, reason, rationality through participation in action, but you can't go the other way with it. It's asymmetrical, right? And that just shows up all over the place in the data. There's all the stuff about pre-K, right? Don't send your kid to pre-K unless it's a true daycare where they just play with toys all day. Then it doesn't matter. Like, that's fine, right? But don't send them to a pre-K where they're like teaching them things. Like, screw that. Kids learn just throw them in a room with a ball, they'll be fine, actually, right? Like, and people don't know that. Yeah, Anselman, I think that's how it's spelled. Yeah, Dale
that's
Farron.
right.
Yeah, that's right. Excellent work, though. Like, and I swear to God, she posted a Medium post or something, and I can't find it. But now I know who she is, and Sanjuro is the one who found it for me, because he was awesome. I don't know where he is. I hope he's okay. There were LA fires and everything. I know he lives in LA. Sanjuro, if you're out there, I'd love to see you. Say hi. Yeah, he found it for me because I'd been looking for like 3 years. I'm like, I know this is somewhere. I was doing internet searches. I was doing searches on Medium. Every once in a while I go nuts. It's been like 3 hours looking for it. I couldn't find it. And then he found it. I don't know how. But yeah, Dale Farron has all the goods on this. Like, there's a real there. If you don't learn through rough and tumble play, or, John Vervaeke would call it the imaginal realm, they're all talking about the same thing. They're just using bad terms because they're science people, and you know how science people are, or at least I know how science people are. The better way to think about it is you need to learn the continuous nonlinear participation of life first and most, and fill most of your brain with that. And if you've got room for logic, reason, rationality, and hard facts and propositions later, that's fine too. Much less useful though. And it is in the data. Like, just look it up right there. Dale Farron. Sally Joe. Parenting is peak understanding cognitive load and feels load. Right. Yeah, part of cognitive load is your emotional load. That's harder for me to talk about, which is why I never mentioned it. like again, right? Like my whole trick is stay in your lane. I just have a lot of lanes, right? But that is my whole trick, right? Like, if you want to seem smart, only speak when you're actually smart about something. This whole problem goes away. You look much smarter than you are. Yay. It's a trick. It's a literal trick. Sorry.
Yeah, you don't open your mouth unless you know what the shot is, right? Like, don't.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
there is a live stream with Father Eric out there. It's probably a year and a half old. And Ted was on, and I just loved it. Actually, I think it was the last live stream I was on with Ted, which is sad. I need more Ted in my life. He's awesome. My whole goal in life is to make Ted my friend. Actually, I just love him to death. He did this wonderful Convivium conference out in Arkansas. It was great. That was last year, and well, year and a half ago, whatever it was. And like Ted was like, "Oh, I just realized that usually when when you speak, I think you know, you're probably about, 60% correct." And then I just realized just now that no, that number's really low. And I was like, yeah. And then I said, like, did you notice when you guys were talking about this other thing that I didn't say a word? I said, that's the trick. I just don't, when I don't know what I'm talking about, I just listen and learn. And he was like, oh, like it was, I gotta find the clip because it's truly wondrous what I did with that. So yeah. Sally Joe, yep, Bruce. Bruce is there for parenting load. Yeah, there we go. That is true. That is true.
Yeah,
If you're on the Mark of Wisdom Discord server, we can
one
help
of
reduce your load. So Bruce is the parenting load reducer for Sally. It's
I
funny to watch.
I reduce it to my wife, even
Yeah,
more so because
exactly.
I'm smart, to a lot of degrees. With regards to children and their rearing, I would say it's absolutely true that you don't need formal ed or even scholastic syllabus for probably, in my experience, under 7 years old, maybe six in our experience.
Yeah.
Uh, but there are occasional children that step up to the plate earlier, but they
Yep.
step up to the plate on their own. At least in our
Right.
experience in homeschooling, and with a pretty big age difference between many of the kids, and so we're teaching to the older, right? And then you also
Mhm.
have this, slightly less than that. The other children are there. They're playing,
Right.
they're doing their thing, right? They have all sorts of
Right.
autonomy. They also they're also involved in the atmosphere there. So by the
Right.
time they reach an age where they ought be learning and or they want to learn, they have a lot of foundation that they're not aware of actually.
Right.
That they employ when they're doing things like critical thinking or answering or whatever, and even just behaviorally. And so what
Right.
happens is you remove the cognitive load that they may have with regards to like behavior modification, because
Right.
there's already expected behavior that's well ingrained in their foundations. So you're not having to waste cognitive load on like sit still, listen, time to read, time to because they
Right.
already have this sort of built into their world. And I think when you do the the formal ed at a young age, there's this sense in which they want these boxes checked for scholastic work, but they also are addressing the behavioral issue at the same time. And you can't really do both at that age. I mean, and I think you see
Yeah.
it when you see older children that are unable to focus.
Yep. Yep.
They haven't had the opportunity to develop that part of their person, right? Or their cognitive abilities, which is the behavioral one. Um,
Mhm. Yeah.
so if your whole
Exactly.
focus is on the scholastic or the intellectual, whatever that is, at a young age, they're not going to develop the behavioral, social, and um, interaction sort of work, right? Um, and that's my experience. And we
Yeah.
see it.
It's true. Yeah.
We see it
Well,
across homeschool kids too that are in, sort of a more classical, what they call classical ed. It's
mhm.
not classical for one. Number two, it's real academic, and they do not do super well interacting in
Right. Right.
any dialogue or behavior or patterns of normalcy.
That's
Um,
right. That's right.
I don't like
Too
it, to be
strict,
honest.
but I mean, that's what ruined the school system in the US, was the Department of Education and federalizing, learning standards. And it just turns out that when you do that top down power from above, right? And this was, basically forced through dangling money over people and people being convinced that money was an answer to education, which of course it's weird, right? I mean, these same people go, "Well, money corrupts." It's like, "Well, then don't take any." You're right about that. Don't take any. Right?
Sure.
Do it for free. Duh, right? Money corrupts, but we want to pay our teachers more. I'm like, do you not understand? Like, you're stupid, right? Like, there's some stupid right there. It's a common stupid pattern, right? Like, yeah, because it just turns out that if you don't turn this into a system, because learning is not a system, everything will be better. And so, do what my parents did, give them a set of encyclopedias early. Look, I mean, that was a big trend in the 50s through the 80s, I think. And that works for some people, but it actually doesn't work for most people, because if the parents aren't doing it, kids have nothing to copy, right? And not all kids should do that. I mean, some kids are just way better with hammers and saws, and they should
Yeah.
not be exposed to encyclopedias, because it'll just ruin their ability with hammers and saws. And like, we live in this diverse world.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a sense in which we've go ahead. You can answer these.
And so
Get
when I
stuck
got
in
stuck in
encyclopedias.
encyclopedias and did less social interaction, right? Well, yeah. I mean, I did too, to some extent, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I would say one of my superpowers, as it were, because of my tumultuous adolescence, is the ability to chameleon myself to some degree in any social environment, because I was moved so often um into different groups and social groups, and so I had to survive. And me being an extroverted in person that loves people to talk, and things like that, I had to learn that skill.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would have gone insane. So there's also a sense in which people rise to the occasion based upon their abilities.
Right.
So I'm not entirely convinced that giving kids encyclopedias at 5, 7, whatever, somehow turns them into a Nobel laureate.
Or
I,
or or
you know,
or an introvert.
or an
E
introvert,
Either
correct?
way. Yeah.
They already, yeah. I don't think you're gonna turn them into the introvert or the extrovert. They kind of have that
Yeah,
built
you're
in.
gonna you're gonna enhance whatever's there,
I think
right?
so.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, the problem with doing things is that when things are being done, momentum is real and it can get out of hand.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why
Mm-hmm.
it's better to teach people, like, man, when I learned about the Pomodoro technique, I was like, "Oh, thank goodness somebody else noticed." It's like, yes, you need to take breaks and it makes you better, right? And it took me years to learn that, for sure, but,
Yeah. Is that the
like,
25-minute interval thing?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
because intervals
I
are
tr-
completely
I
stupid,
tried that.
but well, the
It wasn't
intervals
for
are
me.
wrong. No, the
Okay, sure.
intervals are wrong, but if you use reasonable intervals, and
Mhm.
everybody's intervals will be different. Like, my stamina is way out of control compared to most people, because I can do 8-hour live streams and
Yeah, I'm the
whatever.
same way. Yeah.
But
I can keep it going. Yeah.
yeah, and if you know that, and if you have a high enough energy level, then you can go a lot, like 3 or 4 times longer than most people. And but that also limits what you can do, right? Because short, quick projects are not my thing, right? The way I but I have a way to handle that, right? It's called, when you see it, do it while you're in the middle of something else. And so what I end up doing is I look like I'm multi-threaded, because really I just do 3 things at once all the time. And today was, I don't know what's going on today. I'm very happy that it's going on. I did 4 things all day. Like, I was literally testing software and having the AI make fixes while I was doing the notes for this, while I was talking on Discord, right? And while I was doing a bunch of research, like, all at once, and that wasn't a problem. And occasionally I'd get up and get tea, and then when I get up and get tea, I'd be like throwing little things away and finding little problems, and because I'm waiting for the teapot to boil, I can't go back in the office and get embroiled in that, right? And so I'm very good at managing time when I feel well. In fact, when I feel well, I have a superpower around time, right? And but knowing how to manage that, and like, the Pomodoro technique kind of teaches you, like, oh, you can manage your time, energy, and attention. Oh, really? Right? It's like, oh, revelation, right? But you have to know what it is you have for resources to manage. But I remember distinctly the mistakes I made around that. Like, one time I was at the Free Software Foundation offices at MIT, right? And I was just like, I wanted to learn C, I wanted to learn to code, I want to learn to be really good at this stuff, right? I was hanging out with those guys and they were all awesome and whatever. And I had been sitting at the computer for a good 12, 14 hours. And I mean, I had been sitting at the computer without getting up at all for like 12 or 14 hours.
Yeah.
And finally, my brain said something like, don't you think it's abnormal not to go to the bathroom in this kind of time frame? Right now, the bathroom was about 50 feet down the hall, and it took me 20 minutes to walk there because, oh my God, was that a mistake? I have never made that mistake since, in fact, Bruce. My
I,
God, because and that was the time I learned, like, oh no, you can override anything in your brain. That's not good. Like you need to listen to your brain, boy, because being able to override that is not. I can override my hunger. I can override sleep. I can override anything. This is just not a good idea. So I
yeah,
have to
yeah,
have a
yeah.
management system
You
for
need
it.
a way to manage it. Yeah.
Otherwise, I'll be dead.
Yeah. Sure. Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. That's probably mostly a masculine trait, I would imagine. Um,
No, I mean, I don't think so. I mean,
no?
I think that no, I think that it's something that I would have to argue looks like, but is not autism, right? But your
Oh, I
ability
see.
to
Okay.
override your natural senses is just
Mhm,
like some people have it and some people don't. Like some
mhm.
people, like they need to go to the bathroom and they throw a hissy fit because they don't know when you're young, right? You don't necessarily know, right? And some people don't, right? Let me see what Sally has to say. Sally, taking my baby to restaurants regularly was the biggest preschool education I did with them. Well, whatever, right?
Hard to
Way
argue with
better
that.
than reading at 4 and sitting at a strange table at 4. Yeah. Yeah, because you need to learn to navigate the continuous linear patterns of the world because that's where you live. And you don't need to know how to break it down scientifically, rationally, logically, and reasonably because you just don't need that. Like it's a nice bonus, but it, it's far from necessary. Answerman for great tea drinking while working theme. Check out the song Right Said Fred. Yes,
Right Said Fred by Bernard Cribb. Oh yeah, yeah.
Cribbins. Yeah,
Wait, I
funny.
thought Right Said Fred was the band name.
Right, I thought Right Said Fred was a band name too, but
Mm. No, it's right. He's correct. Yeah, I don't know this.
oh, I do the forgetful go to the bathroom thing, hunger, sleep. Like now, yes, handsome. Yeah. Yeah, well, and then this is why I think time, energy, and attention is the frame, right? Because like once you understand the Pomodoro technique is about managing your time, energy, and attention, you have to extend it a little bit. I get that. It's like, oh, you're setting a relationship between your energy levels and the amount of time you spend, right? And then that's affording you more productivity, even though it's a quote interruption to your flow. And this is why Vervicki flow state is overstated. It's actually wrong. Staying in the flow state too long wears you out. It doesn't energize you. That's just technically incorrect, right? It's just that the
Well,
problem is when you're in the flow state, you will override everything, including like having to go to the bathroom, having to, right? It is the same state at some level as a drug addict gets into with certain drugs, like cocaine in particular. Cocaine is a flow state drug. And like if you don't understand that, and like fair enough if you don't, like most people don't research this stuff the way I do, but I did. And I'm telling you right now, if you research it, you're going to find out too. Oh, wait, these descriptions are identical. Huh, what does that mean? That means the flow state is dangerous, just like cocaine, for different reasons and some overlapping reasons, but also for different reasons. Like too much cocaine just pokes holes in your brain, so that's not great. Makes you emotionally unstable, also not great. The flow state doesn't tend to do that. Uh, but if you go into the flow state through marijuana, you just get really stupid, and some of that's not reversible, by the way. So like, don't smoke pot. It's really bad for you.
totally agree.
Uh, Potheads are a thing because there is a pothead archetype, and it's not everybody, but it's almost everybody, and almost certainly you. So don't do that. It's not that hard.
Yeah, yeah. It's been the effects of marijuana and drugs in general have been like I don't know what the word is, but basically minimized for the sake of what business or productivity or something like that.
Good night,
Good night, Anson.
Anselman. Sleep well. Ixnon says good night. Oh,
Yeah,
apparently they took the name from the
I saw.
song.
I looked it up. Yeah, it's right. 1967 is the song he's talking about. Real kind of silly sounding tune. Yeah, so that's interesting. I don't know how best to describe what would be considered flow state, other than what I've always been sort of told, and in the zone, right?
In the
And
zone,
that's kind of
yeah. That's the modern version of flow state.
yeah. But it's sort of like, I don't know how, if you're in there for a very long time and you can get in there very easily, I sort of question if that's still in the zone. There's at some
No,
point that becomes more baseline, right?
you can, but you won't go to the bathroom.
You can't do that forever. I mean, or for days
No,
on
no,
end.
well, that
Right,
right, but you'll
right.
burn yourself out like you will on drugs. It's exactly the same thing. It's just the drugs are worse because they have a material component.
Right.
I mean, this is always the argument I have with people with drugs. I'm like, listen, there's no material that you're going to ingest that's going to do something fundamentally different than you can do for yourself by yourself. Like, this is where the individualists have it completely backwards, right? Because they're also all materialists. I'm like, no. Actually, all the facilities you need in the things you're talking about do already exist within you as a quote individual, or as a person is the better way to say it, right? Like, that is the correct part about individualism. The incorrect part would be that you need the chemical, because the chemical has side effects, second order effects that you cannot understand, that may be unique to you, in fact, right? Because I don't know if people know this, but like, there's something like 7% of people who take cocaine once die, like, immediately. Right? And people forget this. I'm like, no. This is all over the
It's
literature.
a high
Right?
percentage.
Right.
7?
It's
Wow.
right. And for some of them, they know what it is, but not for all of them. For some of them, it's if you have an underlying heart condition that is, by the way, undetectable. Right. I mean,
So you die.
also the detectable ones, but well, yeah, it speeds up your heart. And if you
Yeah.
have a small defect in your heart, in a lot of circumstances, that's the end of you.
Well, isn't it kind of like it's sort of a shortcut, right, to what you may ought, well, you, like you said, you may be able to do,
Right.
and without the need for external
Well,
exogenous substance,
like,
right? It's a shortcut.
everybody says this. Like, this is in every piece of wisdom literature. It's in every religious text says the same thing on this issue, which is it says two things, right? One is you can do this better without the chemicals, and the other one is if you need the chemicals, you didn't do the thing, right? And so Rick Rapetti talked about this with John Vervaeke. John sometimes just doesn't hear the people he's talking to clearly, but whatever. They have a wonderful friendship. That's fine. But one of the things that Rick Rapetti said was that there was a statement out there in India about this, where basically, the guru says, like, yeah, you could get there with drugs, but that's like taking a helicopter to the mountain. You need a helicopter to get down again, and you didn't climb the mountain. So you got
Excellent
the
point.
same effect, but you didn't get the same effect.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what's puzzling to me about Peterson and Vervaeke and these other guys that talk about drugs. I'm like, you just ignore all the literature? Because you have to ignore all the scientific literature too, right? Like, you actually have to, because I didn't, and it's kind of clear, right? And then
Yeah.
always what they
Yeah.
say, like the hippies, I used to say this all the time. They'd be like, "Oh no, they're not researching this," and I'm like, "Good Lord, are they right?" And these are the same people that scream about MK Ultra. I'm like, okay, listen, you can't believe in MK Ultra's real, right? You can't
Mhm.
say MK Ultra's real and they've never investigated LSD, psilocybin. Like, you can, those two things are the same, guys, right? Just because the results from MK Ultra were bad doesn't mean the research was bad. It means you're wrong about what the research says. The research is 100% clear. Like, these things are random. LSD is dose unstable. In other words, there's no stable dose for LSD. You cannot determine the dose of LSD based on any of your physical principles. I can't say, oh, your body fat is this, and therefore your LSD is this. You can do that with other drugs. You can't do it with LSD at all. At all. It just doesn't work. There's no way that we've come up with to tell what dose is going to have what effect. So this heroic dose garbage is a bunch of bullshit, because heroic dose is indeterminate for LSD in particular. Psilocybin, it's a little more determinate, but these things tend to be completely unstable. The effects are completely random and unpredictable, right? the number of good effects and the number of bad effects usually equal out, but the number of long-term bad effects is overwhelmingly bad. Like, it's really bad, right? Like, if you take LSD once, you can go schizophrenic. The number one cause of schizophrenia, as far as was taught up well into the 90s, was drug use. That was the number one cause of schizophrenia. And they don't talk about that. I don't know why. It's really mysterious. Idiots. They're all liars. Sally Joe. I've been doing in the flow state this whole live stream, cheap drugs for childcare, cooking, renovating my house. I see, Sally. Don't be fooled. Mark is a flow state dealer. Yes. Yes.
I am fascinated by people that by the number of the number of soldiers or others with PTSD that have somehow managed their problems using, I think, ayahuasca or psilocybin and something else.
Ayahuasca is DMT. Yeah.
It's interesting because they're using exogenous for that. You know, it's very hard for them to get over without it. So it is interesting.
Right, but if you actually read the studies, and actually I did, because I was already like, listen, I'm not reading any more of these studies. They all say exactly the same thing. But I went on and talked to Karen Wan. I think this was probably my last conversation with her on the meaning code. And she looked up the study that Peterson quoted in the talk with Vervaeke. And she said, yeah, but if you look up the study, these people, this is all last resort stuff. They were all extreme. So this was like the last thing they could try. Right. 30% of them got better. 30% of them got worse. And the rest had no effect. And I'm like, well, that's a placebo. Terrible study.
Some version of placebo then, probably.
Well, but there's a real problem with placebo, right? Like, and I think Jonathan Peugeot makes this point, like, it's quite possible that everything is placebo. And the chemical is just not necessary.
Yeah. Yes.
And because they don't have a way to measure placebo, or they normally don't do it with those studies, you don't know how much of that is placebo. And so it could be that the good effects, because placebo, when I did the research, and allegedly the placebo number changes over time, which is real. A lot of things in science they found out are changing over decades. So like they're redoing the experiments and coming up with completely different numbers. In some cases, still statistically significant, but lesser. So like something's going on, by the way. Science is actually collapsing statistically, just to let you know. I hate to drop that bombshell here, but I guess we're there. But when I read about it, placebo ran 12% pretty consistently for everything. And so if you take that out, you don't have a 30% hit rate anymore. Right. So your success rate is much lower than your failure rate.
Yeah.
And that's not good. And that's the problem. Like, it's easy to be fooled by positive examples. Right.
Yes.
And that's where the problem comes in, because they come up with all these theories. And I'm like, okay, but listen, your theories can't be selective. You can't say, well, we can't explain the machine elves, but we can explain the fact that they're no longer afraid of death. I'm like, no, that is not good science at all. Like, you have to be able to explain the effect, all of them, not the effects you like. And just like, that's not cool. Like, what are you doing? You can't explain the effects you like and ignore all the ones that you're uncertain about, or don't have an opinion on, or don't want to acknowledge. That's not a good way. That's not a good thing to do at all. Sally Joe, ayahuasca does sound easier than understanding my feelings. Jesus, Sally. No, it'll just cause more feelings. It's not. Sally Joe, do you have to understand your feelings to deal with them? No, you don't. That might be a secret.
Yeah, the thing that's fascinating about that is that, well, I mean, and maybe it'd be different for different people, but you'd constantly be in a scenario, at least I'd constantly be in a scenario where I would question the efficacy of the thing, and then concern myself as to whether or not I'm, even like affected in any way. And then you'd have all sorts of doubt problems at that point, and just real hopelessness if you were stuck in that
Well,
loop.
well, it's weird too because like if you do like a data science dive on the numbers, what you find is that you can remove the chemical and increase the time in therapy and have the same effect in all cases. And people never like. I understand that because of the way science looks at their own papers, they don't do that what I just described, but I did it and it's rather clear. A few of them do talk about it. A few of them do. I think Peterson's mentioned it once or twice, but yeah, all the drugs do when they work is change the time frame. So in other words, they don't do the thing at all. It's actually the relationship with the therapist that's working. And the drugs may speed that up. Oh, fair enough. Like material affects us. Like I get it. Also, they're stupid. Like this is stupid to um to tie those two things together in that way when again your theory is only explaining the part you like. Your theory doesn't explain the whole thing. So shut your mouth. Like what are you doing?
Yeah, the
That's
bias
totally
there is
ridiculous.
yeah. Yeah, the bias is insane there.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's an explanatory and descriptive bias. And like it's a good way to recognize stupidity is recognizing people's biases. And that's definitely an insane bias that really doesn't need to be there. Like they could just be honest about the stats. Like they always throw these numbers around. And I'm like, well, first of all, and Taleb's famous for pointing this out. Read all of his books. He's great in his books. They don't know how to do numbers. Like scientists are particularly bad, especially psychologists, at basic mathematics and statistics. So they just do the statistics wrong. But also, like they never look at this stuff any other way other than with confirmation bias. Like almost all science nowadays, it didn't used to be this way, is confirmation bias. And so they attribute things to science. It had nothing to do with science. Like Rutherford's model of the atom was not a scientific discovery at all. He did another experiment to try to prove something else and accidentally stumbled across something that was best described by this particular model, which is very useful.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, yeah, when you monetize, politicize, and otherwise incentivize work to be done in these fields, it's even more possible.
Mhm.
To what degree do you can you divorce the thing that butters your bread and what you're doing? It's very difficult. Very. And I'm sure that, I'm sure there are people that can, but I don't see how it's possible across the board. I mean, people are bought and sold. I don't know how else to say it, you know.
Awakening to the Muppet Crisis. Welcome, sir.
What a
Can we keep
name.
moving? What does ignorance afford to Muppets? It's not. The affordance isn't from the ignorance. The affordance is from recognizing that you are ignorant about something. In fact, about most things. And see, this is where people flip. I'm like, no, you don't understand. You're ignorant about so much of the world. It's not even worth talking about what you think you know about the world. That's pointless. It's such a small percentage of the world. Who cares? So uninteresting. Fascinatingly uninteresting. Right? You have to be necessarily ignorant about 99.9% of the world, at least. Which matches, from a biological standpoint, the amount of signals you're filtering out.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why I know it's true. Like, yes.
Yep. Thomas Sowell talks about this in Intellectuals in Society. It's a big book. It's a great read. And one of the best quotes out of it is people are, we've elevated the intellectual. And so they're fascinatingly interesting and also very studied in their fields. But the thing that's fascinating, or rather ironic, is they're not aware of the extent of their own ignorance.
Right.
And that is huge. It really explains what's going on.
But when you don't acknowledge ignorance and the potential level of your ignorance, it's very hard for you to have humility.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is why I'm lucky, right? Because again, my stepfather had an unrecorded IQ. So like I just didn't know anything compared to him, and I never will. Like, there's no like, it's not a matter of catching up, right? Like, he just has an intellect that's so far off the scale that it couldn't be measured, right? And like, I'm to some extent, I mean, that's why I'm pissed that I lost all the books. Like, they're all gone. I don't have much to remember it by, unfortunately. Right? It all got stolen. And it was nice to have him around to remind me continually, you don't know anything at all about anything, because he knew so much about so many things. It doesn't even like, I can't describe it to you, and it doesn't seem real to me now, and I lived through it. Like, I could just ask him any question, and it's not even that he knew it. Again, it's he could actually explain it to me. And it was just like, wow, like, how is like none of the other people that were like friends of his could do that. And some of them were, I mean, these were pretty smart people. They're all smarter than I am, right? But they couldn't explain anything to me. I mean, with a few exceptions, like, and usually when they could, it's because I had my stepfather around and I had already discussed it with him, right? And that's the problem. Ignorance, or the acknowledgement of ignorance, affords the humility that you need to be charitable enough to recognize that other people are stupid like you. And when you approach it that way, it's easier to find where their weaknesses are. And when you recognize that those people have those weaknesses, true caritas, true charity emerges. And without that, you can't be charitable. I think this is the real problem. If you don't recognize the ignorance in yourself, it's hard to recognize it correctly in others, right? Because it's hard to discern who's being ignorant when, right? Or who's being stupid when. And therefore, it's hard for you to have proper humility. And therefore, it's hard for you to treat people charitably. And that's when people end up feeling, quote, condescended upon, which is not, it's arrogance is what they're describing, right? Like, oh, if I start talking to you all, uh, 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 about the hardcore details of why in the Linux kernel it makes sense to only do one language, because from a release engineering perspective, if you actually map it out, I could go into that. I'd lose all of you except maybe Bruce, because he can probably keep up, right? But like, that's not condescending, because I haven't brought myself down to your level and just said flat out, it's a math problem. The math says they're wrong. Like, of course, one language is easier to manage a release for than two. Like, this isn't that hard, right? That's condescension, because I'm just reducing it, flattening it down to something my audience is more likely to be able to understand. And you just kind of have to take my word for it that I'm right. 35 years of experience, but whatever. Like, I mean, if I need to get into it with you, I will, which I did on my comments on my channel so far. And I've just explained this to a few people. Like, no, this isn't that hard. It's a math problem. Just reduce it to math. You'll figure it out real quick, right? Like, how many lines are being disrupted here versus how many lines are being disrupted here. That's it. That's all you need, right? If it's not a maintenance issue, then maintain your own redundant code. Maintaining redundant code is the easiest thing in the world to do, by the way. Merging code is much harder than maintaining redundant code. Don't tell me about redundant code. You're a whiny baby at that point. So,
especially
it's
today,
not
with
condescension that you hate. It's lack of condescension that you hate. It's the arrogance of somebody talking to you as though you understand what they're saying when there's no chance that you do, because they're talking in jargon, or they're talking over your head, or using concepts that they know you can't understand. And usually they're using it to feel better about themselves. And that's really the problem. Awakening to the Muppet crisis. So in summary, ignorance does not produce bliss. Yes. Well, ignorance is bliss when it is folly to be wise. It's just nobody does the second part of the quote. Right. And then what does that mean? Like, when you break down these clever quotes, right? Oh, you know what? That's what I was gonna do that I forgot. Damn it. I was gonna grab Bed of Procrustes, which is one of Taleb's books, his book of aphorisms, and read an aphorism first, which I'm planning on doing for all the
But
live streams from now on.
I mean, the ignorance and bliss argument, or rather quote, is juxtaposed to the biblical truth that when you increase in wisdom or knowledge, you increase in sorrow, because you do. So
right, but I mean, that's why the full quote is when it is folly to be wise. But what is that quote actually saying? All these quotes are saying the same thing.
yeah,
Discernment matters. That's what they're saying.
that's right. That's right.
And you can go back to John Vervaeke's relevance realization. Yeah, discernment matters, dude. We already know that. You don't know that because you're not discerning, by the way. So you called it relevance realization because jargon. Whatever.
Yeah,
Also, discernment is important.
Relevance realization sounds like somebody attempting to make a number of word count in an essay.
Well, and
like
the problem is it's not wrong, right? It's not inaccurate,
it's not
or
clear,
imprecise. But the problem is it's undefinable in those terms.
Yeah.
Right? It's discernment is always the problem. And that's why when people come up with literally the stupidest statement I've ever heard, which is the Bible is full of contradictions. I'm like, where are these contradictions, bro? And then they grab one sentence from here and one sentence from there. And I'm like, do you not know how words work? Like, sentences don't have meaning out of their context. What is wrong with you? You can't just grab random numbers and say 8 does not equal 4, therefore math is wrong. Like, no one does that. Like, of course that's not how it works, right? No, it's teaching you a certain type of discernment. It's not propositional discernment. Okay, propositions suck anyway. You don't need them for anything, actually. So, like, cool. It doesn't teach you propositional discernment, because propositional discernment is dogma. Like, all propositions are dogma. That's what propositions actually are, by the way. Like, I don't know why people don't know this, but yeah, if you think about it, that's what's actually happened, right? Like, it's just discernment. That's what it's trying to show you. That's what the Bible's trying to show you. That's what any wisdom text is trying to show you, discernment. And if you see contradiction, that's because you're stupid. It's not because it's in the book.
Yeah, it's a problem with you, not with the yeah.
And that's also what it's trying to show you. It's trying to show you that. Right?
People that do that are not interested in harmonizing text or otherwise. I mean, fair enough, but I don't have to
maybe they are, but they're stupid and they can't.
or they can't. Yeah.
Right. Like, if you're an author like Paul Kingsnorth and you start reading the Bible, you're going to lit crit it. Because of course you are, because you're an author. But you're a retard and you can't lit crit the Bible.
You're also lit critting. Yeah, you're also lit critting translations usually. So at that point, you're effectively.
But it doesn't even matter. It wouldn't matter. I mean, the guy runs around saying that Jesus says a wealthy man can't get into heaven, and I'm like, that's not in there. Sorry, bro. It's definitely not in there. Like, I'm sorry. Like, it's not. No, that is not what it says. I'm sorry. There is no translation that says anything like that. So if that's what you think it says, you did that to yourself, and you're a moron, right?
Yeah,
I mean, and then he says, like, Christianity is incompatible with civilization. Religion is what causes civilization. Like, to be civil is to be religious. The two are inseparable. So, like, I don't like why. Where are you getting this shit from? And then nobody challenges him on any of the obviously incorrect statements he makes, because we're living in this world where nobody wants to take a stand on anything. I'm like, how much of a believer are you if you won't push back when somebody makes a blatantly false statement about the faith? Like, I don't like kick him out of the Ortho Church.
You do you, man. You do you,
kick him out.
Well, when your ultimate goal is to get more converts than ever, you won't do that.
Well, yeah, they've got too much Protestantism in them. Butts and seats.
Stay away. I don't want. I'd rather have a small group of true believing God lovers than a large group.
I am trying to remember who it was. It was a Peugeot talk, I think. Although I've heard it elsewhere. But like, somebody was like, "Yeah, but don't you think everybody should be Christian?" And they're like, "No, Christianity is a religion of exclusion." It's like, exactly. We know everyone's not getting in. And I was like, yeah, where did this other impression come from, right? And it's all, of course, it's the Gnostic, heretical, pagan, hippie Jesus cult stuff. It's like, no, that's no, not everyone's getting in. Sorry, not all the people who are in the church and
Or
quote
of it.
believers are going to heaven either. By the way, they're not like, no, that's not at all. The Catholics don't believe anything like that. They're trying to make it happen because that's what you're supposed to do, but they don't think it will happen. They're like, yeah, whatever. We did our best. See ya. Sorry, bro.
Yeah. Well, do you see well, you got to give some people some assurances, and so there's a sense in which you emphasize one side of that coin, and
Right.
smaller churches typically don't. I would say, maybe they
Well,
emphasize the other one, but yeah.
well, I mean, I think the problem is that when you only emphasize one side of the coin vanishes.
Yeah.
And then people get this impression that, oh, everyone gets in and it doesn't
Why
matter
do
what you
anything?
do. And
Yeah,
right.
antinomianism. Yeah,
Right.
it's rampant. And people are always in our world, and I think a big reason why that's so popular is because there's been this overcorrection and identification against fundamentalism or something like
Right.
that, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so there's like a sense in which we want to overcorrect the fundies, but
Yep.
we don't have a problem of fundamentalism largely. When I turn to like antinomianism or legalistic endeavors, we have a problem with um, complacency or apathy, at least in the West, but probably in the U.S. I can't speak to Europe;
Mhm.
they have a whole other set of problems. But
Mhm.
you know, and so people are losing because I believe discernment is a muscle, and so they're losing that. They're losing the
Right.
muscle.
Right.
So how could they even call out stupidity if they're losing the muscle?
Right. Well, and we're losing lots of muscles. Like one of the ones is discerning, the difference between preaching and teaching, right? Or preaching and ministry,
Yeah.
right? I mean, there's so many, discernments to be had there, right? And people don't notice. And I'm like, well, that's the problem. I mean, that's why if you believe you do not have a religion, one will be provided to you without your knowledge or consent, because you're not noticing when you're being preached to. And like people are enchanted by guys like PVK, right? It's easy to get enchanted by PVK, but actually, like not all of the stuff, but some of his stuff is very harmful for people. And I mean, they've told us this. Like, okay, fair enough. I mean, we'll help you out if we can, but like, yeah, I mean, some of the stuff the guy does is really not good, especially not if you're on the edge, man. Whoo, man, if you're already like not stable, don't go anywhere near that pit of snakes, man. They will definitely make you worse. It's bad over there, right? But people don't recognize what's going on. And then they're just rejiggering what's happening and how it's all working. And it's like, no, I mean, things happen for a reason, right? And then a lot of them too, like they're always trying to drag me in. I'm like, listen, I found PVK and actually I didn't like most of his stuff. I didn't find him because of Jordan Peterson, right? It didn't happen, right? You did. That's your problem. My problem is different. Like I didn't pay any attention to anybody who was criticizing Peterson at all, right? Because it's not appropriate, right? Because if you're on his side and you actually want to help people, then you're not going to criticize the guy doing the work. Like that's dumb. Like that makes you stupid. Don't do that. Like cooperate with them. And if you want to make something better, you cooperate with it. You don't oppose it. Like, no, you oppose bad things because they're bad. You don't oppose things because they're imperfect.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
dumb.
Right. Right. There's a sort of I don't know what it's called. I've heard it before, but there's this sense in which people, if they like something, they cannot disagree with anything they say. It's sort of a
Right.
sycophantic or a dogmatic yes man approach where you can,
That's the fundamentalism to
yeah,
me.
and I can agree. I
Yeah.
can agree with Peterson on a lot of things, and still and support what he's trying to do based in meaning or discourse.
Right.
But
Right.
I could still disagree with him and publicly do so. But I don't have
Peterson
to.
Academy, worst idea ever. Worst idea
Yeah.
ever. No, it's terrible. Like, no, we have too much of that garbage. We don't need it better. We need it gone. Education's not the answer. Certainly not lectures. Oh my goodness, those are the worst.
Well, yeah, I don't even know where that's gonna go. I feel like that's gonna be dead in the water. I just, I can't see that
No,
panning out.
I think in the age of gnosis, it's gonna flourish.
You think
It's
so?
just not gonna result in anybody getting out of the meaning crisis, as he claimed, which that shocked me that he made that claim. I'm like, all of your work,
Oh, I didn't
Dr.
hear that.
Peterson, is pointing in the other direction.
I did not hear him say that. That's fascinating.
Yeah,
Wow.
when he talked to Vervaeke. Yeah.
That's strange.
I thought
Knowledge
it
is
was weird given his work. I mean, I know it's wrong. Like, we've proven that, but like, it's weird given his work. It's weird given any of the data, right? I mean,
yeah,
he just sees the this is like all academics, I think, are actually communists and agree with the Communist Manifesto. And their theory is cult of personality hijacked socialism. And I'm like, okay, but what if cult of personality is a thing and it will always hijack socialism? You haven't solved the problem, because that's also true. But also, what if it's not the cult of personality? Like, I don't like what if there are other underlying issues? Right. And I think that's I mean, I would even ascribe that to Peterson. Peterson, I think, is really on the line of believing that no, if not for Hitler and Stalin, socialism would have been a good idea. And I'm just like, no, right? Because they always focus on the person and they never focus on the flaws of the system. Like, there are logical, rational flaws in socialism that are obvious, right? And they come out in things like the tragedy of the commons, right? The tragedy of commons is a made up problem when you don't want to have a government. Like, because if you have a government resolves the tragedy of the commons. It just doesn't do so in a way you like, but like, I don't care, right? But it really, and like, the socialism people are stupid. Like, anybody who believes any kind of socialist doctrine is stupid. They're misapplying a pattern of a family to a layer above, or two layers above, or three
Yeah, it's
layers
funny.
above.
I listened to recently. I'm a big Billy Corgan fan, right? I love the Pumpkins and guys like that because I grew up in that kind of era. And he has a podcast now, and he was, he had Tom Morello on, right? Like Tom Morello. Okay, he's a mess, but he does that verbatim. He says, basically, Corgan is like, give me a one-word way of describing what your, socialistic intentions are. And he says, when I speak to someone, my first question to them is it ever okay for a child to starve? That's that's where he's coming from. So you said it correctly. They've taken the structure of a family and they've put this into a system of government. And somehow
they just applied it to the layer of strangers.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, first of all, yes, it's okay for a child to starve, right? Because they need to learn lessons like you eat your food when it's available, right? Like, that's why these people always fail with me, because I basically don't have what they call empathy, which is correct. I don't, because that's evil, and I don't do evil. I'm still a no on evil, by the way, in case anybody's curious. To change my position. And so I'm like, no, I mean, I have sympathy, but also, like, if you don't want to eat when the food's available, then we take it away until you learn to eat when the food's available. This isn't that hard. So yeah, maybe they starve. I don't care. I'm gonna go starve to death.
But
and
this
it's
is stupid.
Well, now you've modified the question, right, to manipulate my emotions, which is fine, but also you're retarded. And I don't deal with retarded people. Like,
the whole
isn't that hard.
The history of man has had people surviving without top-down socialistic endeavors, and somehow children didn't starve and die for, like,
That's
what
right.
are we talking about?
That's the problem. Is socialism is very, very new, right? And yet humanity persisted just fine, and in fact built all the things that enabled your bourgeois socialist dreams. That might be a hint as to where this is.
Built
like,
all of it with massive admission or deference to hierarchy, by the way.
Right. Right.
I mean, you
Well,
had
and
to.
the thing was is we didn't have domicide because not because we had homes, because we knew where we belonged in the world. Right? Because that's what Vervaeke's describing with domicide is, rather explicitly, I would argue, at least in Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, misnamed though it may be. He describes it as, well, Alexander the Great conquers the world, and now people fall into domicide. Why? They didn't have to move. Like, I don't understand what you mean by domicide. Oh, they didn't know what the world was and where they were in the hierarchy, and so they didn't have a home in the culture. Okay. Okay. Now I'm with you, right? And that caused a meaning crisis. Maybe not. I'm not quite sure we can go that far with it, but like fair, like whatever. I mean, I can afford that and still make all the arguments that I make normally and explain, yeah, and we're still right and your system is still wrong. It's not that hard, right? Um it's easier when you're right to make your case. And that was one of the things that actually it's so funny that came up today. Manuel was talking about that today, right? Like we talked to John and he could not make a case against our system. It's a good hint. It's a good hint. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good, It's pretty good. And and that's sort of the it's not it that's sort of the problem. Like when people compress the world, right? And they shrink it down and they just ignore time. Like nothing came before. The only thing now is your child and starvation, which leads to death. And then they don't account for things like it's not evil to feed your children before other children, right? Like
But hey,
if the
man,
choice is which child has to starve, then starving a child is perfectly okay,
yeah, yeah,
right? And then they don't
yeah,
account for that, right? Because
yeah.
they do this personalization thing where they take you and one other thing and then they do that relation. That's a
Yeah.
linear, discrete relationship. It's a trick. Those are important. Like you should use those. That's the realm of logic, reason, and rationality, right? But it doesn't scale to multiple things, and it doesn't scale up and down the hierarchy at all. And that's the problem. Linear, discrete relationships only work at the layer, at the scale that they're made in, and you can't move them. That would be stupid. And that's part of how you find stupidity. You find them misapplying patterns.
Yeah, they take Sophie's Choice and apply it everywhere. Like,
Right. Right. But yeah, it just doesn't scale. It doesn't follow that because you wouldn't let your own child starve, that no child should ever starve. That just cannot be true. Right? And it's also not up to you. So it's not relevant to you. Right? Like just because you have that belief doesn't mean everybody else has that. That's why I always break them because I just don't have the same beliefs at all. Because I have the nuanced view, as they call it, right? I have a detailed view. And I'm also used to these little tricks because unlike we'll say everybody in those little cults who apparently never talk to anybody outside of I don't know their own parents or their own boring siblings or something. Um, we had open parlor nights when I was young, and so we had philosophical discussions once a month. And so I'm used to all of these arguments. Like I've been making them and countering them for decades at this point. And like that's part of the like it's so unfair, right? People come into these arguments with me on Twitter, and I'm like, dude, I know you haven't thought about this, and I know I'm about to absolutely effing trounce you in this argument. Like I know I'm just gonna absolutely wreck your life. But hey, you do you. You wanted this big equal internet thing where you were exposed to monsters like me who've actually had these discussions thousands of times where you have no chance at all. And then wrecked every time. And I'm just like, I feel nothing. Somebody should have done this to you when you were young. So you learned a little humility, son. Like, I just don't care. I just really don't. And people don't realize that. Ixnon, this doesn't scale. Also, people get disoriented by changes in scale. Well, look, you get cognitively overloaded at scale. Like, again, like this is I always joke about this, right? Like when we were growing up, you had to eat everything on your plate because of the starving kids in Africa.
Yeah.
And that was the excuse. Legitimately, like every kid around, that was around that time period had the same excuse going on. And it's a retarded argument because you can't transport food to Africa in the form that it was on your plate and expect it to be edible by the time it gets there. This is just stupid, right? Um, I mean, the larger point still stands, but like, I can't have empathy for the children in Africa. Are you high? Like, I can't even have sympathy for them. I've never met one. Like, Africa's a long way away. It's also a continent, and I live like in a house with my parents. What are you talking? I could never relate to this. Now, I'm still traumatized by it, but
There
you
are
know,
people that starve, man. Don't you know that? That's
yeah,
yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, you're telling me there's gold on the moon. Like I've never seen it. I don't know. Like like with kids.
right, right. Sally Joe, if they would give me a robot spider army, you're never getting a robot spider army, Sally. Like we've all decided that we will die before you get a robot spider army. We'll die preventing this. Like actually, no children would starve. Trust the science at scale. You're not getting a robot spider army ever. You're too irresponsible as an artist to have one. Yeah, and that is yeah, but we get cognitively overloaded by things like scale all the time, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like that's gonna happen, right? But you're stupid when you misapply the pattern. Young God, I hate Sims. I wouldn't die for it. Don't worry, Sally. Yes, you will have to die to prevent the spider army from being under Sally Joe's control. It's the manly thing to do. So you can you can either die for it or admit your failure as a male. I don't care. You've got to protect the stupid people from themselves. I went over that earlier in the monologue. Sally Joe has monomaniacal tendencies with her robot spiders. We must make sure she does not get them. It's just a fact of life. Sally Joe, I'm learning how to make a robot spider army argument, though. Sally does have the best robot spider army argument of all time. That's true. That and the space pirate argument. Both are solid arguments, despite how artistic they are. I don't know, Bruce. What do you think? We're at 3 hours. I'm thinking of shutting it down. You got anything more you want to bring up? Anybody want to jump in before
I
I
think that's fair enough. Yeah.
decide to call it?
Yeah. Learn humility, learn discernment. I mean, that's the truth.
Yeah, that's it. That's what you want to go out on.
I mean, that's how to avoid stupidity.
Fair, fair. I like it. I like it. I like it. Oh, what did Ixanon say here? Ixanon, I like the glitter hogs more than the robot spiders. There will be no glitter hogs or robot spiders. Then we can be air pirates. No, there's no air pirates. There's no air piracy. Stop. Yeah, look, stupidity is a problem. And the reason why you can't discern it is because of your lack of humility. And because you're not able to be charitable enough to other people to realize how much of a problem it is. Because most people are stupid about almost everything. And your IQ does not get you out of this. And there's no saving yourself from cognitive bias. You're better off to recognize as much bias as you can, hopefully with the help of people who aren't you, and just admit it up front and move on with your life. Like seriously, just say, look, I'm biased, but right, like I'm biased towards the C programming language, and I'm biased towards like the Linux kernel that I contributed to in the past, only with bug fixes. Too lazy to do any actual driver work, or kernel work, which I'm probably wasn't qualified to do even when I was doing this all the time. Um, Stating that up front helps, right? Like, oh, I don't want to stop you from doing your thing. You do your thing in some other programming language. I don't, whatever. you know, but also like don't mess with my stuff that works. Like this isn't a big ask. And it's not a big ask to interface with people in a way that's charitable towards the things they're stupid about, right? Because then you can deal with them better and be better to them. And hopefully, as a result, they'll be better to you. And the reason why you need to pay attention to these things, stupidity in particular, is simple. It's because the world needs you to be better. And that's the best way to be better. So listen, everybody, have a great week. I'm pretty sure I'll see you next week. Yeah, I think I'm around next week. Um, I don't know what the topic will be, but we'll pick one. You can reach out in the comments or on the Discord server or whatever if you've got suggestions. We do have a big backlog of live stream stuff, but we don't go in order. So I never know what I'm going to talk about. And have a great week. I'll see you all soon. And take good care and try to be better.